This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Talking Left. We are a weekly progressive talk show. And, that's right, we have a new tagline. We're the perpetuation of your liberal entitlement. Good morning,
Shane.
Shane.
A new one that went in with CPAC this week,
Yeah, we need a new one from CPAC. So, as usual, we like to tell you about the news you may have missed this week. And there are a few doozy stories that we're surprised aren't getting more attention. But with all the craziness going on at CPAC, I guess we're not surprised. One of the first ones that we found this week was a new bill being voted on in Tennessee, House Bill 913. It is a restriction on the Tennessee State Employees Union. And what type of restriction, you may ask? Well, it actually prevents unions in the state of Tennessee from using any of their dues money to support political causes. And this is a big deal. You know, conservatives got their way with Citizens United. They got the ability to spend huge sums of cash in political elections. And the main argument they said during that case was that, you know, Democrats had unions and that because unions were allowed to spend money, corporations should be too, because money is speech.
Sure. And that's the typical thing. This is for everyone, and then when everyone gets it, but then we'll take it away from you.
Exactly. And the new bill, House 913, is being pushed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So right off the bat,
we know it's a winner.
Yeah. You know which way it leans. And it's being sponsored by House Republican Caucus Chairman Glenn Casada. His entire reasoning, he's right up front, to prevent state employees from going into the political areas. That's his reasoning. No, you know, usually when they draft and push these type of legislations, they try and pretend like they're somehow protecting unionized workers, that, you know, they're protecting the workers who don't want to give their money to a political cause. They're not even trying that this time. They're flat out saying it's because they don't want employee unions in the political process. And lo and behold, it didn't take much digging at all, maybe 5 minutes, on Alec Exposed to find out.
They've given up on working in the shadows.
Right.
They've been exposed, so heck with it.
To find out where this bill came from. And it is virtually a carbon copy of the Voluntary Contributions Act. Gotta love that name.
Sounds so nice.
From Alec.
Voluntary.
It was written back in 2002.
Freedom, liberty.
Yeah, it was written back in 2002, and it was adapted from Idaho House Bill 329, which was signed into law in 2003. So this is essentially, it's called the Voluntary Contributions Act, and it says that in order for unions to spend money in the political process, they have to create a separate fund that is made up of voluntary employee contributions.
Because, you know, state workers make so much.
Right.
They got all that extra money to put out there.
And is not taken from dues.
I think we should do this with corporations, too. They shouldn't be able to use corporate money, but if shareholders want to kick in some extra money towards political speech, we'll set up a separate fund for them, too.
Yeah.
What do you think?
In theory, I think that would be an equivalent rule. But the difference being, one are state or unionized employees that have, you know, a very small amount of money. Oftentimes, large shareholders in corporations have a few extra bucks to kick around.
Oh, they still have the individual limits.
Okay.
Well, until this next case comes up in the Supreme Court next term. But
individual limits, yes. But
Trust me, these state employees. There's going to be limitations at some point on unions. Let's say there's someone joined a union who's a gazillionaire and said, fine, in Tennessee, I now donate $5 million
to the union.
Trust me, they're going. Wait a minute! Don't you dare!
It'll be interesting if that happens after this next Supreme Court case on the individual contribution limits.
Yeah.
If that goes in favor of the Republicans, it will be very interesting to see if, some of those patriotic millionaires suddenly join some employee unions.
If that happens, I'm sure Alec will come up with another Mad Lib version of legislation. You can
Mad Lib legislation. That's a great name for what Alec does.
Just
Mad Lib legislation.
Plug in your state name, and whereas we hate this, we're going to do this.
Yeah. Well, hey, at least Tennessee remembered to take Alec, off the actual legislation that made it to the floor. That bill, House 913, has passed the committee and is going on to the full state legislation for a vote where it's expected to pass.
Just note to other conservative legislatures who use ALEC legislation, use replace all.
Yes.
Replace all.
Find and replace all.
Find and replace all.
Yeah. And it's especially insulting in Tennessee because this new bill says that union money can only be used for collective bargaining, enforcing bargaining contracts, or helping members with grievance procedures. Sounds innocent enough. However, in Tennessee, public employees are already banned from collective bargaining, so that's kind of null and void. Mm-hmm. The state legislature last year actually removed the word grievance from any state law.
I have a real grievance with that.
Yeah. Just took state grievance out of the law.
You can do 1, 2, 3, and 4, but you can't do 2, 3, and 4.
Pretty much, yes. So all this money, all dues money could now be used for is enforcing union contracts, which I'm sure are going to be so strong considering they can't use collective bargaining, they can't bring a claim when they have a grievance, and they can't participate in the political process.
So in other words, they can buy a lawyer for the last contract, which will be watered down the next contract. Because
Pretty much. Pretty much. You can buy a lawyer to try and fight them as they're stealing your pension.
Yeah. So they're just knocking down the foundation in the basement.
Exactly.
And watching the house collapse.
So, leave it to Alec to figure out how to destroy unions and democratically elected representatives all at once.
I agree with the Tennessee bill. Just make it apply to corporations too.
I say let's go further and just do publicly financed elections.
Well, sure.
That would take the problem right out of it.
And that would take all the power away from the uber rich, and that probably won't happen for a while.
Probably will not happen. Speaking of elected leaders, our president is now going to be authorized, well, rather, the administration is now going to be arguing a brief in front of the Supreme Court on Prop 8.
Yes.
Yes. The president and the administration have come out very strongly recently against DOMA and against Prop 8 and urged the court
to give them some argument time.
To rule in favor. Now they have actually gotten argument time. It's only 10 minutes.
Well, see, the thing is that I think they have most arguments just for not everybody gets to go over the Supreme Court, but you can listen to the tapes. I suggest everyone go listen to the tapes. They're on Supreme Court. It's really interesting, but most cases don't get argument. I mean, 99% of the cases get dismissed. The ones that are heard, a lot of them are just summarily. But the big cases are listened to. But huge cases, Monsanto, 1 hour.
Yeah.
1 hour, and that's for both sides. And actually in Monsanto, I believe there may have been 3. And they're just going to keep dividing up that hour. Now, I think they've extended the argument time. For example, on the Affordable Care Act, they had a number of days, and that was like the longest argument they'd had in decades.
They extended it for DOMA, but not for Prop 8.
Right. So they actually have to divide. If they include more parties to it, amicus briefs, other interested parties, people who have intervened, that hour just gets divided up into more people.
And that's pretty much the case here. U.S. Solicitor General Donald B. Verrilli asked the court to allow 10 minutes for...
Verrilli. He actually argued the Voting Rights Act just a week or so ago. Solicitor General does a lot of the arguing.
Yeah, he asked the court for 10 minutes of review to, give the government's side of why Prop 8 should be overturned.
Executive branches.
Yes.
Obviously.
And originally, and it still may be the case, it's suggested that that 10 minutes time should come out of the Hollingsworth side of the case, the
considering they're siding with them.
Right.
Yeah.
And typical Republican fashion, John Ashcroft and former Attorney General Edward Meese are now asking to submit an amicus argument as well. Their lawyer missed the deadline and didn't submit their amicus brief, their friend of the court brief, on time. But now they are asking the court permission to give the...
It makes sense to me that the executive branches in power would have something to say on this, as they've been elected recently by a majority.
Right.
I don't understand why a washed-up old attorney general, two of them, would have... I mean, what's next? Well, of course, we do have the two idiots from the budgets running around with budgets. You know what I'm talking about.
Bowles, Simpson?
Simpson and Bowles,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds to me like the equivalent of Simpson Bowles.
Well, and interestingly enough, their argument, Meese and Ashcroft contend in their brief that if the court finds that the House of Representatives, who they're claiming to represent, has no standing to defend DOMA, that the court should then find it cannot decide the case because the Obama administration has abandoned its legal defense of the law's constitutionality. Okay, Shane, you understand law.
They're arguing
Explain
on
that.
behalf of the House of Representatives?
That's what they're saying.
Okay, then I can see why they would be heard.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
I can see that.
According to Ashcroft and Meese, without House GOP leaders, there is no genuine controversy before the justices, and so the case shouldn't be heard. Which, first of all, I find very interesting because what case had no controversy recently?
The FISA case.
And didn't Voting Rights Act.
The Voting Rights Act. Well, yeah, they just asked, we don't like this law, we throw it out.
Right.
So what they're saying here is that the only real controversy is between the House of Representatives and the executive. There are actually parties to this case. In this situation, there is an actual fact pattern that they're ruling on.
That's the Meese-Ashcroft argument.
That the real fight is between those two, and if you're not, that's an interesting one, especially for an activist court who really wants to hear this and they want to rule on it. It seems
right. So I'm very happy that the administration will be able to fight in favor of equality, give their voice.
Also, it's really interesting that you'd have attorneys for the House of Representatives that don't really represent the House of Representatives
or the American people.
Yeah, considering how many million more people voted for Democrats.
Yeah, it's interesting, I think, that the House of Representatives don't represent Americans, so it's fitting that their attorneys don't represent them.
We have a quasi-representative democracy.
Yeah.
Kinda, sometimes.
And of course, lots of people have heard this news by now, but, speaking of equality, GOP Senator Rob Portman is suddenly in favor of marriage equality. I'm interested to hear if he, too, would like to submit an amicus brief to the court. Since his son came out to him in February of 2011, he has now written an op-ed in the Columbus Dispatch saying that the government shouldn't deny LGBT people the right to marry.
It took him 2 years. And what was different about 2 years ago? He was up for the BP spot.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I say welcome.
Exactly. I say welcome to the fray. And
I say welcome to the enlightened bunch of the majority of the people in this country.
Yeah. And
whatever your reason is.
And it's nice to see that despite the fact he has been a homophobic jerk for much of his time in office, he at least is able to support his son. And
I'd rather that he be homophobic in the past and now be open to it than the reverse.
Yes.
So
we welcome latecomers to the party.
Yeah. and find some friends, sign them up.
Yes.
Get out there. We're here to recruit you.
He says he will not be a leading voice for equality despite that.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So in other pretty big federal court news, a federal district court judge in San Francisco has ruled that the national security letters are unconstitutional.
Which national security letters?
National security letters that the FBI uses to give telecommunication providers to essentially tap your phones, review your communication. national security letters are like a gag order on both parties, saying that they don't have to, that they can't, in fact, provide any information about the national security letter, including the fact that a demand for the communication information was made by the FBI. They can't tell anybody that
really, but now they've ruled this unconstitutional.
Yes.
So I mean, just real quick, that might get somebody standing to get in front of the Supreme Court finally.
Exactly.
Wow, that's got to have them quaking in their boots.
This judge, Judge Susan Ilston, ordered the FBI to stop.
She must be one of those San Francisco liberal Ninth
She is, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She says that it violates the First Amendment because it prevents providers from speaking by notifying either their customers or the public that they're having to tap customers' information. Says it violates the First Amendment, and it violates the review procedures in separation of powers.
In other words, the courts can never look at this because you can't talk.
Exactly.
There's a strong, I mean, just on its face, I mean, I haven't read any of the papers with this, but there's plenty of times where the First Amendment is said for national security purposes. You can't say anything. I mean, top secret.
Well, it's just
security clearances.
I thought that was great news considering, the FISA ruling by the Supreme Court and the recent request by the Obama administration to let spy agencies review your financial records.
What would be interesting, because imagine this situation. I know we're running a little long here.
That's okay.
There's an NSA letter to tap X person. And for national security purposes, you can't say anything about it while the tap is going on. But they find out, lo and behold, shockingly, they tap somebody who had no national security interest, wasn't doing anything, was completely oops, but we did tap them. Now, the phone company, according to this decision, can alert this afterwards. There's no national security interest in keeping that information. The only reason that you would impede the telecom's First Amendment rights is the CYA. They cover their own butts.
Yes.
And they're just saying that's not a good enough reason to shut up the telecoms. So in that situation, then you have someone who gets notified. They know they have standing for being wiretapped, and they go before the court. Ta-da!
Exactly. So
I had to work it out in my head.
Hopefully that will put some limitation on FISA powers and what the government can spy on you.
You have to do that to fight the power.
Yes. But there is a 90-day hold while the administration appeals.
And then there'll be a temporary stay until it gets heard, and a couple of years from now we'll report on it. Okay?
Right. And last but not least, the king of phone hacking himself, Rupert Murdoch, has been hit with 600 fresh new allegations of phone hacking in the News of the World scandal. Basically, this news just broke. Scotland Yard detectives believe they can identify as many as 600 new incidents of phone tapping. And there's so many new cases, they've had to revisit their timetable for concluding the investigation on News in the World. So far,
I got to say that it's creating a whole new industry over there. 600 cases. They're going to create a new town to try all the cases.
Right. So far, more than 250 people have sued, News of the World, and another 254 have been settled. So settled privately with the news organization. 8 people so far have been arrested or charged, and they're thinking that even more people could be charged and prosecuted with this new 600 claims.
I just have a simple question, and it's, I guess, rhetorical. Why are they still allowed to do business?
That's a good question. The House of Commons over there is essentially debating. There's a big debate on whether or not to put way more regulations on them. And of course, Prime Minister Cameron is essentially fighting regulations that would prevent this from happening again. Really interesting, isn't it? We are way behind, but we've got so much in store. We missed you guys.
We had great stories. You were way ahead.
We missed you guys last week, so we got lots of stuff in store.
6 hours.
Exactly. Lance Enderle, progressive activist and congressional candidate, is going to be joining us, and Daniel Marans, executive producer of Take Action News and policy director of Social Security Works, will be joining us as well. Lots of stuff in store here on Talking Left, so don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Stick around.
For a good time. My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/cancer answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you are checking us out, radioornot.com, SoFlo Radio, or, of course, We Act Radio, 1480 AM WPWC in Washington, D.C. So there has been so much news recently about the big banks and, Elizabeth Warren and so much going on in what needs to happen to control the banks now and what allowed the financial disaster of 2008 to occur. And in huge news yesterday, Richard Fisher, the president of the Dallas Fed actually started speaking some sense, saying that big banks need to be broken up. He said, quote, "These institutions operate under a privileged status that exacts an unfair tax upon the American people. They represent not only a threat to financial security, but to fair and open competition. And they are the practitioners of crony capitalism and not the agents of democratic capitalism that makes our country great." Fisher is chairman of one of the largest Fed branches in our nation, president in Dallas, and he has been an open critic of Wall Street's disproportionate influence on the economy since the financial crisis. So he is now taking this message to a very unlikely place. You won't believe where he said this. At CPAC. He said these words.
Really?
That the big banks need to be broken up.
Did they report on what the room's response was?
No, but I imagine it was a gasp.
Oh my.
I'm hoping he didn't get hit with some tomatoes or something. Yeah, exactly. He made this statement at CPAC telling conservatives.
They're probably like, we should have invited Christie instead.
Yeah, exactly. Telling conservatives that big banks need to be broken up. Now, interestingly enough, and this will, put him back in the CPAC category, he made these arguments, yet at the same time argued Dodd-Frank financial reforms were overly complex and therefore counterproductive.
Overly complex. So he just wants a one-page thing saying, no more big banks.
I don't know what he wants. You know what? If you want to break up the big banks, and he's essentially saying what we've been saying for a long time, is that separating the investment arm of these big banks from banking institutions, making banking boring again.
But breaking it up. Well, there can be interesting banking. Just don't do it with our money. Do it with
right.
Europe.
So
or
I don't know
people
how.
Who know that they're investing into risky.
Right. I don't know how you weave those two messages together, but I'll take it if it means that the big banks finally get broken up. So good for him, Fisher. We applaud you. We've got to run right back to a break because we spoke so long in that first segment, and we don't want to be late.
I blame you.
For Lance Enderle, progressive activist and congressional candidate. He's going to be with us next. You're listening to Talking Left. We'll be right back.
Whoa! Awesome! Totally awesome! All right!
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
When it comes to pursuing their prey, sharks are master maneuverers. Loan sharks, that is. These days, this usurious species goes by the less threatening name of payday lenders. But they are no less voracious, targeting folks in rough financial straits and luring them with easy money come-ons. With lethal interest rates of more than 700%, automatic renewal clauses, and other razor-sharp gotchas, a $500 payday loan can sink a hapless borrower thousands of dollars into debt. That's why states have been restricting the sharks' interest rate gouging and entrapment techniques. But with a flip of their tails, many payday lenders are simply swimming around state laws by operating online and offshore from such regulatory safe harbors as the Bahamas, the Isle of Man, and Malta. From there, sharks can make loans, then begin devouring their borrowers' bank accounts, even in states that ban such loans. How can shady operators pull off billions of dollars worth of these devious and maybe illegal transactions each year? With inside help from such pillars of the financial establishment as Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo. Of course, these upstanding corporate citizens don't dirty their hands or reputations by making these predatory loans, but they willingly allow offshore sharks to tap directly into the borrower's checking accounts and withdraw unconscionable interest payments electronically and mercilessly. There's a four-letter F word for what the banks are doing to their own depositors: fees. Automatic withdrawals by the sharks can cause a tsunami of overdrafts in a borrower's bank account. and banks happily collect fat fees for every overdraft. This is Jim Hightower saying, for more information and action, go to responsiblelending.org.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says new models must be found for workers to win representation to find a way for millions more workers to join the labor movement. Trumka says these new models must not force workers to survive trial by fire and a workplace organizing drive where employers often coerce and intimidate workers to the point that the legal right to organize is often rendered meaningless. Trumka says the labor movement will not be rebuilt solely through NLRB elections and voluntary recognition by employers. As organized labor retools for the future, Trumka says the AFL-CIO must work with groups like the National Day Laborers Organizing Network, the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and the growing number of worker centers around the country. The Teamsters Union this week in Memphis planned a coordinated response to what it calls Republic Services Allied Waste's efforts to impoverish their workers, ignore health and safety protections, and hike employee health costs while halting retirement benefits. The Teamsters say Republic Allied Waste has used lockouts of workers and forced strikes in a campaign to lower the living standards of its workforce. The union has 2,000 members currently working under expired contracts in cities across the country. The Teamsters want cities to know about Republic Allied Waste's anti-worker actions, and Teamsters Secretary-Treasurer Ken Hall says this behavior won't be tolerated by the union. The Minnesota AFL-CIO is supporting a bill by State Representative Joe Atkins that would extend unemployment benefits to workers for the duration of a company lockout. The legislation, known as HF 602 or the Employer Lockout Accountability Act, would restrict public subsidies for companies that use employee lockouts. The ongoing long-term lockout of American Crystal Sugar workers helped spur the legislation. The Minnesota AFL-CIO says when employers lock out workers, whole communities are hurt by the economic impact. Is the job situation in the U.S. starting to turn for the better? Jesse Russell takes a look.
According to the Labor Department, new job openings jumped by 2.2% in January, a good sign for a growing economy, even though the number of openings is slightly below November's total. Employers are also laying off fewer employees. According to Time magazine, January saw the fewest number of employees laid off since 2001, while Americans quitting their jobs rose to the highest level in more than 4 years. Employees tend to only leave jobs when they feel confident about the job market or if they already have a job lined up. The unemployment rate dropped to a 4-year low of 7.7% in February, and current monthly job gains are averaging more than 200,000. Still, the economy needs to create twice as many of jobs per month in order to keep up with population growth and make up for the number of jobs lost since the Bush administration. Those numbers also don't account for those who have stopped reporting unemployment or those who are considered underemployed.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him going on to fascinate millions with his talent? 1 in 260,000. The odds of him having 15 career NASCAR victories? 1 in 1.7 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism? 1 in 88. I'm Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano.
Most of the country saying, what the heck is that bumper music?
Yeah. That is in honor of our guest, our friend, amazing progressive activist, congressional candidate Lance Enderle. How you doing, Lance? Did you like that intro music Shane played for you?
Shane, I love you, my brother. Way to rub it in.
You should probably tell everyone else who doesn't know the Michigan State fight song. That was a Michigan State fight song.
Yes. Lance is a Michigan State grad, and Shane is University of Michigan. So they are friendly.
We have a friendly rivalry.
We
both hate Ohio State.
True story.
So, Lance, you being from Michigan, I'm curious on your take about Detroit's new emergency financial manager, Kevin Orr.
Where do I start to laugh?
Yeah, exactly. The laughter ends.
Well, let's do a little backstory here first.
Sure.
This EFM bill was put in about 2 years ago to replace a public act, and it basically put it up on steroids. What it did is allow these financial managers to now to bypass the city councils and elected officials, basically put them to the wayside, gave them the ability now to sell off city properties without authority, and, a few other catastrophic things that would be, not good for a community. Back in November, the citizens of Michigan put on the ballot to remove this emergency manager the way it was written.
Right.
And it passed as far as being removed.
Right, and Rick Snyder put it back in, and most people realize that he made it this new emergency management law unable to be repealed. But most people aren't sure how he did that, which is attaching appropriations to it.
What happened? Okay, the people repealed this law. Then we had this thing called the lame duck session in our House of Representatives and our state Senate. And during this lame duck session, within 72 hours, they passed 283 bills.
Oh, my goodness. That I didn't know.
That was when we had that right to work rally and all that going on at the Capitol. That was part of that lame duck session. They literally pushed all these bills through.
283 bills in 7 hours.
It might be 183, 283. Again, my numbers aren't in front of me, but it was some astronomical number that anybody in their right mind who was put in a position to either authorize or veto these should have sat there and vetoed everything.
Right. I mean, that's like more bills than the United States Congress passed in the entire last session.
And these were bills going against taking away women's rights to choose, taking away health care, increasing taxes on retirees. They took away earned home credits, which most senior citizens in this state took a hit of about $800.
It's just that, I mean, this law in and of itself and the appointment of Kevin Orr has my blood boiling. I feel like this is just a slap in the face to the democratic process. To know that all of those pieces of legislation were passed in 7 hours, I think 72 hours just makes my head spin. How much damage can you do in 3 days?
Put it this way, they're still going through some of those bills. They haven't signed or vetoed all of them yet. We're into March.
Wow.
Now knowing that the state of Michigan repealed that, the citizens did, one of those bills was a new EFM bill that was put through during that lame duck session. That is how we ended up back with these emergency financial managers, because they were put on hold. Now, or, initially on paper, the guy looked all right, helped save Chrysler. But you break it down. You don't, like you said, it's a democratic process. We're not an aristocracy. We don't appoint people to positions to give omnipotent power to.
Right.
It's not democracy. And the battleground is here in Michigan. And you and I have had this discussion before. Everybody talks about ALEC.
Oh, yeah, we were just discussing ALEC this morning.
ALEC was born from Michigan. There's a group called the Mackinac Center. They've been around forever. Back under John Engler's administration, this group came out. It was founded by the Koch brothers, Dick DeVos of Amway fame, his partner Van Andel, Eric Prince's parents before they passed away, the heirs to Dow Chemical,
So essentially a who's
the initial ALEC.
Essentially a who's who of corrupt rich people.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And the Mackinac Center is the birthplace of ALEC and Americans for Prosperity and everything else. It's centered in Midland, Michigan. It's a think tank.
It's also the birthplace of the Overton window.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. And are they? Is it ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, or this Mackinac group that's behind these emergency manager laws?
The Mackinac Center and ALEC. Back in the day, we used to be able to put legislation and propaganda through the same avenues. Well, since we've gotten into this internet superhighway age, and people have all this access to information, and we want more transparency and credibility, we had to separate the two. The Mackinac Center just gives strict policy now, and this is good or this is bad, and these are the things that we need to look at. The legislation comes through ALEC.
Right, absolutely. They send their model bills all around the country, and where unfortunately they get passed, and most voters aren't aware of where the bills originated. They originate with some company, some lobbyist office, and it's delivered with a $10,000 check or less. Right. So this emergency management law, this Kevin Orr, he is a bankruptcy attorney, and I think it says a pretty big statement having him in this position that Detroit may be headed for bankruptcy, which is pretty darn rare for municipalities to file bankruptcy. But doesn't that leave it open for the commons to be sold off, for Detroit to essentially be Mitt Romney'd, to be broken up and sold for scraps?
That's what this EFM's all about. It gives them the total authority to do that, to try to cut some bleeding. It's like right now up here in Lansing, and it's hard to believe this clown's a Democrat, but the current mayor who ran for governor is proposing to sell City Hall. So this is where it's getting right now in the state of Michigan.
Did you just say sell City Hall?
You can't fight City Hall, but you can sell it.
That's what I'm getting at.
Do they have plans for the City Hall representatives to meet in another building? I mean, are they going to be, using...
It's a knee-jerk statement. And instead of looking at the real thing, start cutting at the administrative salaries and move your way down. We're going to look at eliminating public properties.
Right. I mean, I realize that Detroit is in a dire financial situation. There are, billions of dollars in debt. That the jobless rate is over 18%, and the population of the city has essentially shrunk by half. But isn't that the perfect opportunity to, try and bring jobs back? How does selling Detroit off for parts fix the situation? How does it bring jobs back? How does it bring back tax revenue?
Danielle, that's trickle down. Come on now. We sell it to some big investor, and they'll dump their money into there, and we're all going to get the golden shower.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it amounts to. It's about privatizing our communities, turning them into fiefdoms. I mean, we want to repeal we want to destroy public education to the point where our kids can't read or write, so they're going to have to take what we tell them as gospel. This is like going back to the Middle Ages.
Yes. This I don't feel is a solution for Detroit, and I can't believe that the people aren't, I realize that there was protests even on the very day that Kevin Orr was announced as emergency manager, but I cannot believe that there are not more people in the streets just furious about this. I mean, not only have the leaders that they've already democratically elected essentially become null and void, but there's an election coming up in November, and as according to Rick Snyder, this new dictator of Detroit will be in office for 18 months. So doesn't that negate any election results for upcoming November before they even happen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's in Benton Harbor, one's been in place. In Flint, they've been in place. The elected officials have no power. They have no say. They're just figureheads.
So
at this point, we elect them, and their voice has been taken away. And when you look at Detroit, Detroit's the largest city in Michigan.
Right.
And it took me a while to get my head around it, but Detroit is the heartbeat of Michigan. And if Detroit goes, Michigan will go. And we have a lot of, it's like anywhere. We have divides throughout our state, and Shano could probably attest to this. You get certain pockets in the state, and, some people embrace Detroit. Other people look at it as a blight. And for whatever reason that may be, they have some backward thinking. Well, they don't understand the consequences behind it. And, Detroit's a beautiful city. It's got a lot of history. It's the largest city here. And those people, for the last 20 years, have been left to the wayside, all the way back to the Engler administration.
We are speaking with progressive activist and candidate Lance Enderle. We just have a couple minutes here, Lance. What would you suggest? You are definitely a leader when it comes to getting involved and getting active in your community, to say the least. What can people do to try and fight this legislation? I realize they can't repeal the law. What option do they have to stand up to Kevin Orr and Rick Snyder and these, dictatorships?
Well, first and foremost, the first easy thing is they need to contact their representation in Lansing and in Washington. Flood their lines, send them emails, make them get it so they block you. Be a nuisance. Let them know that this is where you stand, and there's people behind what you're believing in.
And just don't give up, right?
Exactly. And then secondly, people got to start taking to the streets. We need to. We have these protests, and then they end at a designated time. They didn't end at a designated time in Wisconsin. And 100 years ago, when we were fighting the labor movement, they were going 24/7.
Yeah, if they don't stand up and they don't fight this now, pretty soon, just as you said and I said, the commons are soon going to be privatized, and good luck getting those back in the next 100 years.
Well, that's just it. One of the big things for me right now is we're coming into the 100th anniversary of the labor movement in Michigan for the most part. Christmas Eve this year will be the 100th anniversary of the Italian Hall Massacre. It's America's largest unsolved mass murder. There were 73 men, women, and children killed in Calumet, Michigan during the labor strikes.
Wow.
And what it amounts to, it's part of the reason why we can't yell fire in a crowded building anymore. But this was caused by, we'll call them Pinkertons. And these people did not die in vain. We need to stand up across this country as the working class and take back what is ours.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. Lance, I could speak to you all day. I wish we had a longer segment available. But thank you very much for joining us and, letting us know what people in Michigan actually think about this completely undemocratic process going on in Detroit.
Right. Anything we can do, and I appreciate you getting the word out there, because if it's coming here, it's going to come to a neighborhood near you soon.
Yep, that is unfortunately true, but hopefully the people of Detroit will wake up and somehow overturn this mess. Lance, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Danielle. And Shano, have a good one. My friend, I'm sorry Michigan didn't achieve where they should have.
We'll see you at the end of next week.
All right, my friend.
At the big dance. Okay.
And we'll have you on again soon, Lance.
All right,
have a great afternoon.
You too. Bye.
All right. Lance Enderle, everybody. You can follow him on Twitter at Lance_Enderle. You can check out his Facebook page and keep an eye on him because he was a former candidate for U.S. House of Representatives and
against Mike Rogers.
Oh,
he's woo.
And Lance isn't going anywhere, so expect to see him again.
Yeah, and, they have been protesting in Detroit. They did traffic jams. I don't know if you know about this.
Oh.
Where they slowed down I-75, traffic just brought to a halt, and 94, I think, is what runs east-west. So 75 north-south and 94. So, there were outward public expressions of displeasure, we'll say.
If the leaders think that people are protesting and unhappy now, just wait until they privatize something like the water. people will be out in the streets. So anyhow, you're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. We will be right back, so don't go anywhere.
No plans at all. Evil man's always transcending. Fighter like sheep, swallow everything. Always simpletons or pretending. We got no plans.
This is your moment of clarity from LeeCamp.net. So the Department of Energy said they might begin allowing radioactive metal waste to be recycled into consumer products like forks and belt buckles and zippers and Madonna's anti-aging chamber. So soon enough, you might have your very own radioactive belt buckle. And a lot of people are upset about this. They're like, they're going to give us cancer. They're going to make us sterile. But think about it. Which brands and companies buy incredibly cheap, recycled, possibly deadly metal? The companies that sell cheap. The dining room at the Trump Palace is not going to the 3 Mile Island metal store for their forks. So the radiation poisoning will largely only hit lower income people. Just like radiation is used to kill cancer cells in order to preserve the healthy cells, this is societal radiation used to kill the cancer of our society. Poor people. That way the healthy cells can grow even stronger. It's a brilliant idea. People shouldn't be upset about this. It's like giving the whole nation chemo. Plus, belt buckles and zippers, what better way to sterilize the less savory portions of the population than putting radioactive belt buckles out there? Those rednecks love their big old belt buckles. Sure, some of the people were trying to weed out only wear dirty sweatpants, and we'll have to figure something out for them later. But in the meantime, let's sterilize the toothless, belt buckle wearing, Jeff Foxworthy, commemorative plate-owning. Of course, there is one problem. So much radiation might create mutant superheroes. That's how it always happens in the comic book movies, right? Little radiation, and then boom, you're blinking at odd intervals and shooting webs out your fingers. Superhero poor trash would be, it'd be the worst. I mean, what would they even use their powers for? Stealing Kenny Chesney albums and looking through walls to watch women breastfeed their kids, shooting lasers out their eyes to cook meth more quickly? It would be a havoc. But seriously though, 14,000 tons of metal are now under review for initial release, and the sale of metals could bring in $10 to $40 million profit. So how much money would you have to give our government to get them to agree to radiate their own people? $10 million. We're selling the American people at bargain basement prices. And what really sucks is nowadays you have to pay double the price for food in order to get the non-GMO brand, double the price for the non-sweatshop labor underwear, double the price for the clean water, and soon double the price for non-radioactive utensils and zippers. This is bull. This is existence extortion, a full-on hard-on of capitalistic abortion. Pay double or we'll make your life short and miserable. All we can do now is hope the poor white trash superheroes save us all. Anyway, that's been your moment of clarity. If you haven't already, leave your email for my mailing list and you'll be the first to find out about live tour dates, special offers, free everything else, where I go shopping, what I like to eat. No, maybe not that last stuff. But just go to LeeCamp.net and scroll down, and on the right side of the screen you'll see the box where you can join the mailing list. Thanks a lot. Keep fighting.
No plans at all. Evil man's always transcending. Fighter like sheep, swallow everything. Always simpletons or pretending.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Yes, you are. Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. RadioOrNot.com, SoFlo Radio, or of course, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, WPWC in Washington, D.C. And thank you to the people who subscribe to the podcast or to the YouTube channel for free. For free, yeah. I don't know where you guys all came from, but you rock.
Welcome.
Welcome.
And enjoy the podcast. If you listen live and then enjoy the podcast with no
commercials. Yes.
No commercials.
Yes.
I sit there and I cut them all out afterwards.
Yes, you do.
Which makes it very difficult in the fact that all of our breaks are floating, so finding them can be really interesting.
This show's going to be interesting.
I start each show trying to write them down, and then I forget because we get on a roll. I wrote down the first break, and that's it.
That's it. All right, this one's going to come up on us pretty quickly because we're running behind again. But we were just speaking with Lance Enderle. He is a progressive activist and candidate in Michigan, and discussing the emergency financial manager, Kevin Orr, that was just appointed by Rick Snyder. So it had me doing a little digging to see, what other cities in Michigan have had financial managers, and how did it go? About 20 cities.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong with a dictator? 20 cities in Michigan have had emergency financial managers. None more notable, at least recently, than Arthur Blackwell. He was the emergency financial manager for Highland Park, Michigan, and the Michigan Court of Appeals just released an opinion upholding a $332,837 judgment against Mr. Blackwell for breach of contract, conversion of funds, and breach of fiduciary. I can never say that word.
Fiduciary.
Thank you. Duty.
And by the way, conversion means theft.
Right.
It's a tort of just stealing.
Right.
So
Blackwell.
Fiduciary means he had an obligation to put the interests of the city ahead of his own. He didn't, so he breached that. He took money, and now he's got to pay it back. So
he didn't. In fact, he made unauthorized payments to himself totaling $264,000 with city funds.
My question is, why is he behind bars for embezzlement? I'm going to answer that question for myself. Because it's a wondering out loud kind of question.
Right.
I would imagine that he has some kind of immunity and that he's a government official. Sometimes you can't.
Is he a government official?
I don't. That's the question. That's why it's a wondering out loud. And
wouldn't government official indicate that you were elected?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yes. Well, but he's been there. There are government officials who are appointed all the time. So the thing is that he's appointed by law by the governor. Blah 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 blah. But he should be being prosecuted for embezzlement, I would think.
Well,
it's
Blackwell,
a higher standard of proof, but
and this is just to show, that I don't care what
corruption.
This is just to show that I don't care what side it's on, because Blackwell was appointed by Governor Granholm, and according to Blackwell, there was a verbal understanding that he would pay himself a salary of $264,000. I would imagine that something like that would be put into writing.
I would think so.
Just going to go out on a limb. I mean, Granholm doesn't strike me as the type to say, a wink and a handshake, you could pay yourself over $200,000 a year.
I think it has to be in writing.
Yeah. So, and the U.S. or the Michigan Court of Appeals thought so too. So we'll have to really keep an eye on the situation in Detroit and make sure Mr. Kevin Orr is under a microscope. And let's just hope that the commons of Detroit don't get sold off for scraps. So we have lots more show coming in. We have lots more show coming up
get it
here.
Together, maybe.
On Talking Left. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the Dianne Feinstein, Ted Cruz discussion, shall we call it?
Yeah, that's one way.
That's one way of putting it. It was quite an interesting exchange. We're going to get into that next. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we will be right back.
See, that wasn't so bad, was it?
Ooh, I gotta say, that was fantastic.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
It's Tuesday, March 12, 2013.
Anti-nuke protests mark second anniversary of Fukushima disaster.
Why does the Navy care about sea level rise? It's like, well, we're the Navy. We tend to build our bases at sea level.
Navy's top commander in the Pacific warns climate change is the biggest threat to national security. Is flammable ice the next big energy source? Forests move into the warming Arctic. Plus, Score one for the Sharks.
All of that and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you the gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you.
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 You don't need us to tell you gas prices are on the rise. I know.
Thank you, local news. Now that you put it that way, I don't need you at all. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, some very good news today. If things don't work out here on this planet, we learned today via NASA that the Mars rover has discovered that Mars was once inhabitable.
Well,
will that help?
Well, sort of, not really. NASA says Mars could have supported living microbes because they found indicators of ancient water. Don't know if that'll apply for us today.
I've been looking for any kind of good news, and once again, you ruin it for me.
Oh, so sorry.
Thanks for nothing, Desi Doyen. What do you have for us today?
Well, we got lots of climate news, but first, on the second anniversary of the worst nuclear accident in a generation, thousands of anti-nuclear protesters across Japan commemorated the earthquake and tsunami that led to the meltdown of 3 reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in 2011. They rallied to demand that the government abandon nuclear power. The stricken plant itself is now in cold shutdown. Workers have begun the process of decommissioning, decontaminating, and disposing of hundreds of thousands of tons of radioactive waste and spent fuel. It's a process that is expected to take at least 40 years and cost over $100 billion, all paid for by Japan's taxpayers.
Are the crippled reactors still producing radioactive waste at this point that has to be done away with?
Yes, they're still having to go through the same cooling process that they did right after the accident.
And they're still having to find new places to put this radioactive water.
Yes. The drive to replace nuclear in Japan's energy mix has led to a potential energy breakthrough of sorts. Japan announced on Tuesday they have successfully extracted natural gas from offshore frozen methane hydrates, a world first. Now, methane hydrate is methane gas trapped in slushy ice in the deep ocean. It's literally flammable ice. But scientists not involved with the project warn that not enough is known about the impacts. For example, any methane leaking into the atmosphere is 20 times more potent at warming than carbon dioxide, plus burning it releases CO2.
So a new energy source, but really just a new way to burn fossil fuel?
Pretty much. Global warming has moved vegetation north in the last 30 years. A new NASA study shows forests are now growing like gangbusters in the warming Arctic and have moved 7 degrees north in latitude in just 30 years. That's in keeping with the results of a new update to the famous hockey stick temperature graph, now showing that global temperature is the warmest it's been in 4,000 years. And the speed of rising temperatures is unprecedented since at least the last ice age 11,000 years ago.
Other than that, nothing to worry about?
And the latest measurements of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere show it has jumped to 395 parts per million since last year, which NOAA scientists now say makes it increasingly likely we will overshoot the limit of 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise that governments have agreed on as a goal, unless emissions are reduced.
And yet, with all of that, over the past couple of weeks, the New York Times has shut down its green desk and its green blog. Genius.
Climate change is a primary threat to national security, too. The top Navy commander in the Pacific, Admiral Samuel Locklear, told the Boston Globe on Friday that the biggest looming national security threat is not cybersecurity or the nuclear threats of dictators, but climate change, saying, quote, "You have the real potential here in the not-too-distant future of nations displaced by rising sea level." In a speech featured on climatecrocs.com, the former chief oceanographer of the Navy explains the threat to U.S. infrastructure.
Look at where our oil refineries are. It's all at sea level. There's tremendous infrastructure that this will have an issue for.
Finally, score one for sharks. Recent surveys have concluded that industrialized fishing operations have killed 100 million sharks in just the past few decades. But a new draft international global wildlife agreement signed this week would protect 5 new shark species and 2 manta ray species.
For more on that story and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via iTunes, listen to us on your mobile device via Stitcher and the TuneIn radio apps. Find us and like us on the Facebook and follow us 24/7 on the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And you don't need us to tell you that this has been your Green News Report.
This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. We Act Radio, SoFlo Radio, RadioOrNot.com, or maybe on our home sweet home at TalkingLeft.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. We appreciate it.
And just because you like us doesn't mean you actually like us.
Yeah.
You just want to know what the heck's up.
Exactly. Or you just like some of the guests.
Yeah.
You know, you don't even have to like us.
No. I don't particularly like myself. But that's a whole other show. Well, I'll call him the doctor, whatever.
Speaking of people we don't like, Ted Cruz, noted communist hunter.
Oh, there's got to be a movie trailer parody out there.
Yes.
Ted Cruz.
Communist hunter. Noted communist hunter Ted Cruz is really concerned that Dianne Feinstein wants to take his guns.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't
And
think he's really concerned Dianne Feinstein wants to take his
I don't think so either, but he should be concerned that he doesn't have a firm grasp on the Constitution.
Yeah, he has a firm grasp on something. Yeah, I think he's more concerned that Rand Paul got more press than him last week.
I think you could be
There's
right.
a lot of mugging for the camera going on.
I think you could be right, especially in his really, for anybody who didn't hear it, in the Senate Judiciary Committee, there was an exchange between Dianne Feinstein and Ted Cruz. The committee, not the full Senate, but the committee has passed a controversial ban on assault weapons and high-capacity ammunitions. This really controversial ban only bans 157 different kinds of guns. It leaves thousands of other guns available, and it limits magazines containing more than 10 bullets. It will still most likely fail to pass in the full Senate, but it was a show of what we would like to happen.
Well, you have to start the process here, and they're doing the process, and then wherever it does fail, then you know where the problem is. In the next election, you fix it with the vote. So if they didn't do this, you need that vote on the floor.
Right.
We really want that vote because while you won't be able to get 60 votes in the Senate, you'll know who voted against it, or hopefully we'll know who stopped it.
Right.
There'll be a hold. I would think that I don't know. I don't know if Harry Reid will put it up.
Harry Reid is already very opposed to this Dianne Feinstein new assault weapons ban.
It's because he didn't want to put it up because he will have to vote no in Nevada.
Right, and he wouldn't want to lose that A rating by the NRA.
Yeah.
He says, according to Harry Reid, I don't see us getting 60 votes. It's pretty clear the other side is locked in opposition to the assault weapons ban, basically saying he doesn't understand why Feinstein included this assault weapons ban, attached it to a universal background check, because he's saying that by doing so, she's not being realistic, and it could make the universal background check.
Try for the whole deal, and then if you can only get the background check, then do that.
Right.
Because we know what happens when you do a piecemeal the other way. They'll take the stuff that's really popular, and then the things that are a little tougher but are still favored by the majority will never get through.
Exactly.
So I understand the reason for doing this. It doesn't foreclose doing just the background checks later.
Right. Well, in response to this bill passing committee, Senator Ted Cruz, as I said, noted communist hunter, really rudely challenged Dianne Feinstein about whether or not the Bill of Rights should be selectively applied to some people and not others. You know, saying that by limiting people's rights to have any and all assault weapons they want, that she was selectively making the Second Amendment right not apply to certain individuals. And he rudely criticized her, saying, well, then can the Fourth Amendment apply to only certain people? The First Amendment. You have the exchange, Shane.
I do. We'll start with Senator Cruz's question.
And the question that I would pose to the senior senator from California is, would she deem it consistent with the Bill of Rights for Congress to engage in the same endeavor that we are contemplating doing with the Second Amendment in the context of the First or Fourth Amendment? Namely, would she consider it constitutional for Congress to specify that the First Amendment shall apply only to the following books and shall not apply to the books that Congress has deemed outside the protection of the Bill of Rights? Likewise, would she think that the Fourth Amendment's protection against searches and seizures could properly apply only to the following specified individuals and not to the individuals that Congress has deemed outside the protection of the Bill of Rights?
Senator, yield for a question.
And her response was obvious, you know.
I've got her response. We'll get in and actually, I think she was so taken aback by his
rudeness.
Yeah, and condescension.
Yeah, he continued to speak at her, but yet referred to her as if she wasn't in the room.
Just the whole tone and tenor of the entire hearing was, and she finally had it.
Yeah, and
her answer was pretty much, I'm going to try to answer without blowing up and wanting to.
Right. It was, I'm going to grit my teeth and not
and I'm going to
use a lot of expletives here.
Maintain the demeanor that you should be yourself displaying as a senator.
Right.
It's a little bit of a, but then we'll go ahead and answer it as if
we were sitting there.
He wasn't being condescending to us, because it's a lot easier when you're not getting essentially bitched at.
Let me just make a couple of points in response. One, I'm not a sixth grader. Senator, I've been on this committee for 20 years. I was a mayor for 9 years. I walked in, I saw people shot. I've looked at bodies that have been shot with these weapons. I've seen the bullets that implode. In Sandy Hook, youngsters were dismembered. Look, there are other weapons. I've been I'm not a lawyer, but after 20 years, I've been up close and personal to the Constitution. I have great respect for it. This doesn't mean that weapons of war, and the Heller decision clearly points out 3 exceptions, 2 of which are pertinent here. And so you know, I mean, it's fine you want to lecture me on the Constitution. I appreciate it. Just know I've been here for a long time. I've passed on a number of bills. I've studied the Constitution myself. I am reasonably well educated, and I for the lecture. Incidentally, this does not prohibit, you use the word prohibit, it exempts 2,271 weapons. Isn't that enough for the people in the United States?
So
she did get into some legal reasoning, Heller. She did point out the exemptions. But his root question was, is it within the Congress's providence? Should they be able to say certain books aren't subject to the first, certain speech isn't free, and that there are certain people that can be searched and seized?
Right.
And the obvious answer would have been a point blank,
yes.
And we have.
Right.
And we will.
For a legitimate reason.
Many. There are certain books that you cannot publish. Child pornography. You cannot do that. You will go to prison. She could have, on the Fourth Amendment, she could have turned around to the gallery and said, yes, there are certain people who do not have Fourth Amendment protections. Everybody who came into this federal building was searched.
Right.
When they came in. When you go to an airport, a federal prisoner, those are certain people that are not, have those protections. There are certain speech you cannot libel, you cannot slander. There are all kinds.
You cannot yell fire in a crowded theater.
There are all kinds of limitations, and those are the exact types of limitations for public general welfare and safety.
Right.
A reason that they're trying to essentially put reasonable restrictions on the Second Amendment, because there are reasonable restrictions on every single one of the amendments.
Right. Making the good, the general welfare more important, reasonably so, than small limitations on individual rights.
And based on Ted Cruz's rhetorical statement there, because his answer is pretty much you can't stop anyone from having any type of weapon.
Right.
Or arm.
That's what he would like.
So you could have, literally, with his interpretation, crazy people could own bazookas, nuclear weapons.
Pretty much.
If they're considered arms.
Pretty much. I mean, based on the Republicans' own argument that this is all a mental health issue and that we need to keep mentally ill people from getting guns, doesn't that negate his own definition? Haven't we then limited people's rights to privacy, search and seizure, and guns?
They certainly want to blow up their Fourth Amendment rights of people who've seen mental health professionals. They want those records out there. Look what the NRA is advocating.
Absolutely. I mean, there are reasonable limitations on rights. If Senator Cruz is so concerned about our right to privacy, our right to free speech, I don't hear him going after, these NSA letters that we talked about at the beginning of the show. I don't hear him going after FISA. I don't hear him standing up to the Obama administration for wanting to have access to our financial records. I don't hear a word from him or from many Republicans on those. For God's sakes, we only hear it from Rand freaking Paul.
Agreed.
So where is he on those? If he's so concerned about any limitations on our rights or any egregious limitation of our right to privacy, why does that only apply to guns?
I don't know that he is a lawyer, a constitutional guy. I can't explain it. I honestly can't, because it's hypocritical. It is. I don't have an answer for you. I don't know.
Right. I mean,
it's grandstanding. It's
it's exactly what you said. Rand Paul was getting too much attention, so he needed to put the limelight back on himself. And what better?
He was getting a lot of attention when it came to the Hagel nomination.
Right. What better way to do that than to be a complete and total jerk to a established, amazing senator like Dianne Feinstein?
Right. And the thing is, it seems like the Senate is going the way of entertainment television. It's like they have to be more and more insane, like some kind of Desperate Housewives of Capitol Hill. Desperate House Husbands. I don't want to be sexist here, or it's the Real World DC.
Yeah, the Real World DC. I like that one.
You want to get more camera time, so be more insane and crazy.
Well, it's just this gun stuff is ridiculous. Americans have said that they're fine with additional restrictions on gun. A recent study showed that gun sellers, gun stores, retailers are fine with more restrictions on guns. The only people who aren't are the NRA and crazy communist hunters like Ted Cruz.
The leadership of the NRA.
Right.
Not NRA members.
True.
Big difference.
So, anyhow,
Hey, maybe we should stop the NRA from being able to take those membership fees and contributing them to political campaigns like they're trying to do in Tennessee.
If it applies to unions, why not to associations?
Yeah, well.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I wouldn't lose any sleep over the NRA not being able to stick their nose into politics. But anyhow, I digress. We have got lots more in store. We're going to have Daniel Marans of Take Action News and Social Security Works coming up in just a few minutes. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. And you go on Ted Cruz's Facebook and Twitter and tell him that stop being a communist hunter.
He can be a communist hunter. He's just not going to find any.
They're all at Harvard, remember? Yeah. So, anyhow, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left.
I'm David Schuster of Take Action News, and you're listening to my favorite show other than my own, Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Okay, astronaut, you're up. You'll be meeting with Wish Kid Brandon.
Roger, Brandon.
His wish is to see a space shuttle launch.
All systems are go. We are clear for liftoff.
This year, more than 27,000 children will be diagnosed with a life-threatening medical condition.
And Cowboy?
Yes, ma'am.
You'll be meeting with Shayla at a dude ranch in San Antonio.
Let's saddle up.
Some will miss school, some will miss time with their family and friends.
Princess, are you here?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for rescuing me from that evil witch.
Juliana wishes for a princess-themed room makeover.
That sounds magical.
But with your help, the Make-A-Wish Foundation can lift their spirits and give them a special kind of hope.
Pirate hear it.
Yar!
You're up for Isaac's wish.
Aye, aye, Captain.
The wishes of thousands of children are waiting to come true.
You can help make my wish happen. Visit wish.org today.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at BigBrothersBigSisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Brad Friedman, your friendly citizen investigative blogger, journalist, troublemaker, muckraker, and all-around swell fellow from BradBlog.com. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. 1 hour of troublemaking and muckraking ripped from the pages of BradBlog.com and sometimes from the dark recesses of my mind. We'll have investigative interviews with newsmakers, we'll call out the liars, frauds, and phonies, and we'll even give kudos to the good guys if we can find any. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. We'll report on politics, elections, election reform, mainstream corporate media failure, media reform, global warming denialism, and everything before, during, and after. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday, now a full hour, 3 to 4 p.m., right here on Pacifica Radio's KPFK and coast to coast and around the globe on kpfk.org.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Come together right now over me.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. In just a few minutes, we're going to be speaking with Daniel Marans. He is the policy director of Social Security Works. And he's going to discuss with us why this grand bargain, Obama's proposed cuts to Social Security, are a horrible idea. And he is not alone in that sentiment. As of this week, 107 House Democrats, the majority, more than half of the Democratic caucus in the House, have signed a letter declaring, quote, vigorous opposition to cutting Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid benefits. And that is specifically in response to Obama's proposed chain CPI. I think a lot of us have heard about chain CPI. I don't know how many of us fully understand the impact the chain CPI will have.
And while we don't have Obama's budget yet, this is Jay Carney on chain CPI.
As part of a big deal, a part of a comprehensive package that reduces our deficit and achieves that $4 trillion goal that was set out by so many people in and outside of government a number of years ago, he would consider that the hard choice that includes the so-called change CPI.
Now, interestingly enough, and we're going to get into this with Daniel as well as later in the show, the Republicans have not put this change CPI or cuts to Social Security in their budget.
Have you read?
Neither have the Democrats.
Have you read Ryan's budget?
I've read
The Social Security part says their plan for Social Security is to tell President Obama to put together a plan for Social Security. I mean, that's their plan.
Right. But they're not
You
proposing...
touch the third rail, not us.
They're not proposing a cut to Social Security. The Democratic plan is not proposing a cut to Social Security. The Progressive Caucus plan is not proposing a cut to Social Security. So the only individual offering Social Security as part of a budget plan is President Obama.
I don't understand.
I don't get it. Social Security does not contribute to the deficit. Social Security has a surplus.
Perhaps it's his way of being able to say, I am proposing some kind of cuts to so-called entitlements or insurance programs. You instead of that, do this. Instead of voucherizing, I mean, not that they're going to negotiate whatsoever.
Well, but it's
Paul
not.
Ryan's budget is a farce.
It's not the only. I mean, Obama has not released his official budget, but the proposal he discussed with John Boehner this week is $1.2 trillion. $1.8 trillion, including replacing the sequester with alternate spending cuts. That would include $700 billion in tax revenue, $400 billion from cuts to Medicare, and $130 billion from applying change CPI to Social Security. I'm just at a loss for words as to why this is even on the table.
And what's interesting is, for once, the Republicans' obstinacy works in our favor. In that, the fact that they won't do a grand bargain means that we're going to save Social Security from the president. It's Republicans who are standing in the way of change CPI at this point.
Part of me wonders if, and this is really trying to give the benefit of the doubt, but part of me wonders if Obama knows there's no chance that the Republicans will compromise, regardless of what he puts on the table.
I got to tell you, the sequester was a bluff that they called.
True.
He didn't think they won't for a minute allow those defense cuts to go in. Wrong. Be careful how crazy they can get, because they can always get crazier.
Yeah. Well, Senator Bernie Sanders, independent, but caucuses with the Democrats, spoke out against these proposed changes, and I love his statement. I don't want to break the bad news to you, but the president is not the only elected official in the United States. He says some of us believe very strongly that it would be absolutely wrong to cut Social Security benefits.
There you have it.
Yeah. So, although Democratic leaders Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi are quietly siding with the president, it looks like House Democrats and many in the Senate are not going to go along with this. So, opposition to the president may be bipartisan on this one.
Cool.
Good enough for me if it keeps Social Security off the chopping block.
And the next time some Republican accuses you of being behind or everything and of being, no matter if Obama does it or not, well, here's one. There's plenty of them as well. They just choose to ignore them.
Exactly.
Whatever Obama does is fine. No, that's not true.
Exactly.
No, that's not true.
No. So anyhow, we're going to be speaking with Daniel Marans next. He's going to help us break this down of why this cut is such a bad idea and how it would hurt so many people and why it shouldn't be included in any quote-unquote grand bargain. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we'll be right back with Daniel Marans.
Everyone expected just a piece of fluff, but we wanted to do something important. Issue stuff.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Besides being founders of our republic, what did Thomas Jefferson and George Washington have in common? Answer: hemp. America's founders were strong promoters of this extraordinarily useful agricultural crop, and both Jefferson and Washington grew it. The first draft of our Constitution was written on hemp paper, and as late as World War II, the government urgently pushed farmers to grow the crop as part of a Hemp for Victory program. So why are American farmers today prohibited from producing this patriotic, profitable, and pesticide-free plant? Political nuttiness. Most recently, in a frenzy of reefer madness, U.S. drug police decided that President Nixon's Controlled Substance Act of 1970 not only outlawed marijuana, but also its non-narcotic cousin, industrial hemp. If ignorance is bliss, they must have been ecstatic, yet their nuttiness remains the law of our land. The good news is that a wave of sanity is now wafting across America. In Colorado, for example, farmer Michael Bowman and Denver hemp advocate Linda Parker helped pass Amendment 64 in last fall's election. It legalizes personal pot use, which got all the media attention, but it also directs the legislature to set up a program for, quote, the cultivation, processing, and sale of industrial hemp. Bowman now hopes to be the first American farmer in generations to plant a legal crop of it, hoping to do so on April 30th, the 80th birthday of family farmer hero and hemp champion Willie Nelson. The red state of Kentucky is also on the move. Its Republican Ag Commissioner, backed by its Chamber of Commerce, is campaigning to legalize hemp farming there. And Kentucky Senator Rand Paul is co-sponsoring a national bill with Oregon Democrat Ron Wyden to take hemp off the controlled substance list. This is Jim Hightower saying, to help spread this seed, go to votehemp.com.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Paul Ryan is unleashing a zombie proposal that was rejected by working families. That's the AFL-CIO take on Congressman Ryan's latest budget in the U.S. House. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says that Ryan's zombie budget doubles down on harmful cuts to education, health care, and other programs that help build a strong middle class. The AFL-CIO says instead of closing tax loopholes for the rich, the Ryan budget gives them even more tax breaks, paying for them by privatizing Medicare with vouchers and slashing other programs that help working families. The AFL-CIO is calling for rejection of Ryan's zombie budget and the repeal of the sequester federal budget cuts. A McDonald's franchisee is being accused of misusing the nation's foreign exchange worker program. Jesse Russell reports.
A McDonald's franchisee in Pennsylvania is being accused of abusing foreign students in the United States as part of the State Department's J-1 visa program. Speaking to The Nation magazine's Josh Idelson, the students alleged they were provided substandard housing and required to work shifts that ran for up to 25 hours. They said they were paid $7.25 per hour and had $85 per week deducted from their paychecks to cover rent. According to the workers, they were threatened if they raised objections to their treatment. Last week, they held a rally inside one of the McDonald's to bring attention to their situation.
Managers, let us know.
The managers let us know
that they can make a phone call.
That they can make a phone call
to send us back to our country.
To send us back to our country.
If we don't do as they tell.
If we don't do as they tell.
Since then, 15 of the 17 work exchange students have walked off the job and have enlisted the help of the National Guest Worker Alliance. The franchisee, Andy Cheng, has resigned from his position on the board of the Ronald McDonald House Charities of Southern Pennsylvania. Complaints have been filed against Cheng with both the state and labor departments. Both departments are investigating the allegations.
Teamsters President Jim Hoffa is urging New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg to intervene in a federal class action lawsuit seeking equal pay for female current and former school safety agents. More than 5,000 workers, 70% of them women, have joined the suit. The Teamsters have tried to close the 20% gender pay gap through collective bargaining, but the city so far has refused. The lawsuit seeks $35 million. Portland, Oregon's City Council has approved an ordinance that creates a paid sick day benefit for 120,000 workers in the city. Paid sick day laws are already in place in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Seattle, and Connecticut. Dozens of other efforts are underway to legally guarantee paid sick days for workers, including efforts in New York City, Philadelphia, Maryland, and Vermont. A federal bill providing a paid sick day guarantee, the Healthy Families Act, will soon be reintroduced in Congress. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Confessions of a Potentially Perfect Parent, brought to you by AdoptUsKids.org.
I don't know how to talk like a parent. Don't make me come back there. You see what I mean? It's pretty awful. Try it again. Don't
make me come back there. Now that's pretty good. That one kind of sounded like my dad. Weird.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who would love to put up with you. Call 1-888-200-4005 or visit adoptuskids.org for more information. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt Us Kids, and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Yes, you are. Welcome back to Talking Left. We are live on SoFlo Radio, radioornot.com, and of course, We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C. And joining us now is fellow We Act Radio family member, executive producer of Take Action News, and the policy director of Social Security Works, Daniel Marans. You can follow him on Twitter at Daniel Marans. Of course, you can check out his and David Schuster's awesome show at takeactionnews.com. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Danielle. I'm so glad to be here, and that was a delightful introduction.
I could go on. You were somebody we definitely consider a friend and a fellow We Act family member, and it's always a pleasure to speak with you and hang out with you, and especially on the Social Security stuff, because you really know your stuff, Daniel.
Well, it's certainly, that comes with the territory, I guess. If I work on that issue during the week and I don't know it, then there's a problem.
Well, I recently read, and this is actually an article I think you posted back in January, called 3 Arguments, where's the full title here? It's on Huffington Post, 3 Arguments about CPI that progressives are debating. And you really explained in this one article why CPI is a bad idea, I think better than I have heard anywhere else. So Obama is proposing this grand bargain, as he calls it. He seems to be the only one offering Social Security cuts at all, and chain CPI being a big part of that. Can you explain to people who don't understand why chain CPI will hurt seniors and veterans and people with disabilities as much as it will?
Yeah, well, so the Consumer Price Index is basically a basket of goods that we use to measure how prices are going up across society. And we use it for a number of different things. One of the things we use it for is how much we increase Social Security benefits every year, because the benefit levels are set, but to make sure that they don't erode over time so that they maintain their purchasing power, we have to just adjust them every year by adding some nominal dollars, adding some money to the benefit. It's not really increasing it, but it's helping it maintain its value as prices go up and that the value of that money goes down across society. So currently that's based on just the standard Consumer Price Index that measures the expenses of the broader population. It's some question as to whether that, many of us argue that even that is not accurate.
Right.
Because it doesn't account for the specific expenses of seniors and people with disabilities, which are obviously the people that rely on Social Security the most. But what the chain CPI, the chain Consumer Price Index, would do is basically it says, because when prices go up, people make an adjustment. And if, let's say, the price of beef goes up, then people will just increase the amount of chicken, a presumably cheaper product, that they purchase in the proportion that the price of beef goes up. So basically, under the chain CPI, prices don't go up as quickly because it's assumed that people are switching for cheaper products as prices go up.
Now, with that logic, which is faulty in and of itself, because if people have to select an inferior product, obviously their purchasing power, their cost of living, their quality of living has gone down. But isn't it a factor of diminishing returns? They may be able to switch chicken for beef and still have a reasonable quality of food intake. But what happens when chicken becomes too expensive? Do they then switch to canned tuna? And what happens when that becomes too expensive? I mean, isn't this essentially a race to the bottom?
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm not. I don't know where it ends, right? I mean, if you're currently eating tuna, or if currently your lifestyle is very modest, which we know that most people on fixed incomes that is the case,
right?
Then this is an even greater hit. But even more importantly, I would say, is the fact that people over the ages of 65, their expenses are completely different. And specifically, we know that people over the age of 65, healthcare expenses make up 13% of their spending. People between the ages of adults under the age of 65, healthcare expenses are just 5%.
So it's a big increase. It's more than double as a proportion of their income.
Correct. And our argument is basically like, accurate or not, as a measure of the basket of goods for the general population, if you're a senior and your primary expenses are health care, you can't switch bypass surgery you can't substitute bypass surgery for a hernia operation just because you want to.
Right.
The ability to sort of switch those things in and out doesn't really apply to seniors' basket of goods.
Right. You couldn't switch an expensive, cardiac medicine for a generic, especially considering, Medicare can't negotiate with drug companies. There isn't that same ability to substitute for a cheaper product.
Right. And Danielle, you also put it right, which is to say that regardless of whether it is or is not more accurate, when you're forcing people to buy something cheaper, or that is a cut in the purchasing power of that benefit, no matter what.
Right.
And in fact, because what happens is that relative to current law, if you're adding a smaller cost of living adjustment to a smaller base every year relative to current law, it's a cut that compounds. So in fact, it's something that hits people as they reach late old age, or if they've been receiving Social Security for many years on disability, harder and harder. If you claim Social Security at age 65, age 75 change CPI would be a $658 annual cut. At age 85, it would be a $1,147 cut. And at age 95, it will be a $1,622 cut.
So,
and of course, the cumulative, I mean, when you add up every single individual annual cut, the cuts are enormous. You get to something like, by age 95, $28,000 less than you would have gotten under your currently scheduled Social Security.
And, I mean, just doesn't that seem counterintuitive that when it would be more expensive for seniors to live, where their medical costs would likely go up, their ability to, travel easier and maybe find a cheaper grocery market or find a less expensive doctor to visit, et cetera, when it would be more difficult for them to control their expenses is when we're cutting the benefits from them the most.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're hitting all the notes here. The rates of poverty and near poverty are higher over the age of 85. And that's because, exactly as you said, medical expenses go up. People are more likely to have gone through their savings. They're more likely to be widowed, and so they're not pooling their expenses with their partner. I mean, it's crazy. And that's actually one of the reasons that sort of some of the more liberal people that are at least comfortable with change CPI or think that it's a necessary compromise have said, well, if we're going to do this, then we need to have a 5% increase in benefits that is phased in from age 80 to 85. It's called sort of a benefit bump up for the oldest old, or a birthday bump up. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, first of all, if you have a policy where you have to sort of like hatch a benefit increase for the oldest old to make it palatable, or claim that you're going to hold the poorest people harmless, and it's probably not a very good policy. I mean, because that means it's hitting those people especially hard.
Absolutely. Just to remind everybody, we're speaking with Daniel Marans. He is the executive producer of Take Action News with David Schuster, also here on We Act Radio, and the policy director of Social Security Works. All the links to the show as well as his amazing organization will be up with our blog post. The article I was referencing, I finally can turn my page here where I can see the full title of your article. And it says a lot right here in the title, is 3 arguments progressives are using to defend Social Security cuts and why they're wrong. And you wrote this back in January, and I would love to say that it's no longer relevant, that Obama had came to his senses and this was off the table. But instead, it seems like we're in Groundhog Day here, where regardless of what's offered on either side, Obama seems really active about pursuing this chain CPI. Do you have any idea why that is? Is there any talk in the political arena as to why he's pursuing this so strongly?
Well, Danielle, it's a good question. I think that the president has decided, going back a ways, even to the debt ceiling negotiations in 2011, that it is important for him and his legacy to show that he can make that grand bargain, that he can put together some kind of a deal with Republicans that will reduce our long-term debt. And a big part of that needs to be showing that as a Democratic president, he is willing to be that sort of Nixon goes to China figure and cut Social Security and Medicare, the proverbial sacred cows of the Democratic Party. Now, obviously, I think that's completely faulty logic, but it's something we've seen before with Democratic presidents. I mean, I think Bill Clinton felt that he needed to show that he could cut welfare. There's something about showing your manhood as a Democratic president by showing your willingness to hurt vulnerable people. I mean,
it's really
that's the best thing I could think of.
Yeah, it's really disturbing to say it that way, but it seems quite accurate. You lay out a great case as to why progressives should be against these, and how listeners, if they would like, can debate even their progressive friends that are saying this chain CPI is a good idea. And you really do an awesome job laying it out, Daniel. I'm going to put this link up on our site, and I suggest that people use this as a resource over the current budget debate, and who knows, perhaps afterwards if the issue isn't still decided. What do you suggest people can do to help make sure chain CPI doesn't become a reality?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. Visit no-cuts.com. No-cuts.com. That is a huge petition that the Strength and Social Security Coalition and progressive members of Congress are using to gather signatures to tell Congress, don't cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and cancel the sequester. Because right now, the issue is that the president wants to replace the sequester with this grand bargain.
Right.
With something that includes this Social Security cut. So it's basically a 2-point plan, but the bottom line is no cut. This past Thursday, activists from Social Security Works and a number of other organizations had a press conference with progressive members of Congress like Alan Grayson, and then afterwards we helped deliver 300,000 names that we've already gathered on that petition to Speaker Boehner's office, telling him no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Well, that's awesome, and hopefully, we can get a few more signatures through the listeners of this show, and hopefully they will continue to spread that word through their social media and their friends and family. NoCuts.com, and that link will be at the top of our blog post today.
I just signed it and tweeted it too.
Thank you, Shano.
Nope.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. Honestly, nobody knows this stuff like you do, and I'm sorry I didn't catch this piece sooner that you put in Huffington Post. January of this year, 3 arguments progressives are using to defend Social Security cuts and why they're wrong. I suggest everybody go read this. There's really just some great, simple, logical explanations that are easy for people to understand, and there's just no disputing this, Daniel. Really well written and really well spoken, as always. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Danielle, I appreciate those kind words, and thank you for looking through my Huffington Post archive. And I have to tell you, it has been my pleasure to come on Talking Left because you guys have a great show. You're cool. You make progressive politics and policy sounds smart, fun, and interesting. And I think that everyone that I know, I'm going to tell them to tune into Talking Left every Sunday.
I think we just got a promo,
No
Daniel.
kidding.
Thank you. Well, have a great Sunday, Daniel. We will talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye. Daniel Marans, everybody. You can follow him on Twitter at Daniel Marans, Marans, and Take Action News. Social Security Works. All the links will be up with the show blog post. And seriously, I've read a lot about this change CPI because it is so difficult to understand.
It is. There's not a lot of information out there. There's so many questions.
This piece that he wrote is concise, it's well written, it's well researched, and it's just, you want a way to explain this to your friends and explain why it's a bad idea, go and read this article. And I'm telling you, everything you need is in there.
Cool.
Yeah. So
inside the petition, they have like 43,000. It's sponsored by Alan Grayson. I don't know if you mentioned that in there.
Alan Grayson, no-cuts.com. We will put it up on the top of our site as well as on all our social media. You should as well.
The Congressman with guts.
The Congressman with guts. We will be right back here on Talking Left with me, Danielle, and Shano. Lots more show left in store, so don't go anywhere. Thanks for listening.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks from the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide, and you're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
We got no plans at all. Evil man's always transcending. Fighter like sheep, swallow everything. Always simpletons or pretending. We got no plans.
This is your moment of clarity from LeeCamp.net. There's a story I like about an old farmer who sees his friend and says, I had a great idea. I found out my mule is so dumb that when a little bit of sawdust falls into his feed, he eats the sawdust. So I figure if I mix just a little more sawdust each day into his food, I can eventually get it so that he's only eating sawdust. It'll save me a fortune. The two farmers then run into each other a month later, and the one says, how's it going with that mule? The other one responds, it was going great until the dumb mule died on me. I'll have to start over again with a different mule. This seems to be the game the corporate elite is playing all over the world. How much fucking sawdust can they mix in with our food? Recently, Christine Quinn, the woman who wants to be the new King Bloomberg of New York City, stood up against paid sick leave for workers. So if you stay home when you're sick, you earn less that month. Mow sawdust. Walmart has recently been sued for forcing workers to show up early and stay late without overtime pay. Mow sawdust. No more health care coverage. Mow sawdust. Public transit fares go up and service goes down. Mow sawdust. You pay $12 to see a movie and it's only 80 minutes long. Mow sawdust. You buy the milk duds at the stand for $10 and the box is half empty. Mow sawdust. Raising the Social Security age. Mow sawdust. $50 to check a bag at the airport. Mow sawdust. Can't drink the water. Have to buy bottled water. Mow sawdust. Public schools defunded. Mow sawdust. And you know what Biggie always said? Mow sawdust, mow problems. The people making these decisions are short-term greedy. They want the savings the sawdust will afford them. They don't give a if they will one day find themselves standing over a dead mule going, hey mule, hey, what? You didn't like the new dinner I cooked for you? Okay, fine, I'll back off the sawdust a little bit. Get up, you lazy mule. So it's about time we animals do like that book where all those animals are on that farm and they rebel and they take over the animal farm and everybody in town is like, what happened at the animal farm? And someone's like, that animal farm stood up for itself is what it did. I believe the book was called The Cow That Got Away. That's been your Moment of Clarity from LeeCamp.net. Help Moment of Clarity continue. Become a $5 a month sustaining member at LeeCamp.net. You can also sign up to donate one tweet or one Facebook post a day at donateyouraccount.com/LeeCamp. Thanks. Keep fighting.
No plans at all. Evil man's always transcending. Fighter like like sheep, swallow everything. Always simpletons or pretending.
The traditional light bulb, a groundbreaking invention in 1879. Other groundbreaking ideas from that time, the whalebone corset, the pedal-operated submarine, and the two-story outhouse. We've come a long way since then. It's time our light bulbs did the same. Visit EnergySavers.gov and learn about energy-saving light bulbs. See, these new bulbs are more efficient than the old ones, like a text message is more efficient than a carrier pigeon. They last longer, too, like how we humans last longer now that doctors use antibiotics instead of leeches. And they cut down on our energy costs, because in our own groundbreaking age of aeroplanes and moving pictures, we deserve a light bulb that saves us some cash. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you are checking us out. We Act Radio, 1480 AM, radioornot.com, SoFlo Radio, Progressive Blend Radio, or maybe over on iTunes or YouTube. Thank you. So the big news this week was CPAC, Conservative Political Action Conference. We were watching it on C-SPAN yesterday. It was like a whole bucket full of crazy.
It was. It was infuriating.
Yes.
Quite honestly.
Yes.
And then the essay contest winner was from my high school.
I'm sorry.
Oh, man.
It's pretty hard to it's pretty hard to out crazy our normal Fox shows on the weekends that we yell at the TV and you know it's really hard to outdo that, but they managed to time and time again. And Think Progress was there, or rather some of the great bloggers over at Think Progress, and they outlined a few of the craziest things they learned at CPAC.
Cool.
Yes, some very, very important advanced views, as Think Progress notes. Number one, Marxists, that's a hard word to say, control the Catholic Church.
Really?
Just in case you didn't know that.
Is Ted Cruz noted communist hunter going after the Vatican now?
No, I don't know, but fringe fundamentalist Cliff Kincaid and his organization, America's Survival, we're handing out brochures warning that Roman Catholics, that the church has been, quote, compromised philosophically, not only by infiltrators from the homosexual movement and Marxists, but by adherents of the so-called New Age philosophy.
Well, the church has been for a very long time for helping the poor. It's kind of in the New Testament and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Jesus kind of talked about that.
Probably where they got their Marxist thing. You know, helping the poor, helping the sick, helping the least amongst us.
Right.
Doing to others, you know, blah, blah, blah. Turn the other cheek. Jesus, I guess, pretty much was a Marxist.
Yeah, exactly. Noted communist.
Catholics.
Number two, the UN will take 1/4 of America's land.
What?
Yes. This is that whole Agenda 21,
yeah.
crowd. Now they are the American Jobs Alliance. They all have these really patriotic, gung-ho, yay America sounding names. The American Jobs Alliance warns of the dangers posed by the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, don't get me wrong. Yeah. There are some serious dangers in the TPP agreement, and lots of people could criticize them. But instead of using reasonable critiques, the AJA sounds the alarm that the Trans-Pacific Partnership is filled with Sharia law and claims that the partnership cedes 1/4 of the U.S. over to foreign control. How they get to this number is really just,
Probably in a footnote in one of Glenn Beck's books.
Exactly.
Which probably was even in the fiction section for real. You know?
Yes. Number three, marriage equality must be opposed. And while the American Society for the Defense of Tradition, Family, and Prosperity handed out brochures listing the 10 reasons why homosexual marriage is harmful and must be opposed. The Ruth Institute thought that was not nearly enough, and their brochure contained 77 reasons to oppose.
Do we have a list of any of these reasons?
It imposes acceptance on all society.
Acceptance? How dare we have acceptance?
Rental property owners might have to agree to accept same-sex tenants.
I think they might already have to, at least in some states.
Yeah, but, nothing.
They don't want the Civil Rights Act to apply.
And I know we're running late here, but these are too good to pass up.
We have more time. We can do some more next.
Yeah, we could do the rest. There's two more. They get even better. We're going to save them for...
There's a teasy.
Yeah, we're going to save them for just a few minutes here. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. All craziness at CPAC coming up next.
It's Thursday, March 14, 2013.
Department of Interior expands solar again. Department of Energy expands nuclear again. Just what's in that Pope smoke? Plus,
now we can't afford for this world to get hotter. And we can't afford polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbons in our water.
John Lennon has a message for New York's governor.
All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
An asteroid could destroy the Earth. Global warming solved.
Well, that's one way to look at it. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it was in the 90s out here in Los Angeles yesterday, smashing heat records. And I got to say, it was great. I wish every day could be like this.
Well, at the rate things are going, you just might get your wish.
Yeah, sooner than I hope, I guess.
Probably.
What do you have for us today?
Well, we have a pope. What does this have to do with green news?
What does this have to do with the green news?
Well, I'm glad you asked. The Vatican on Wednesday divulged their secret recipe for smoke. The black smoke, it turns out, is mostly from coal. It's derived from coal tar and sulfur, whereas the white smoke is from pine resin. That both create a steady stream of smoke on top of the natural smoke from the burned ballot papers.
And thus the carbon parts per million in Vatican City spiked over the past day or two.
Yes, it did, and even the Vatican spokesman said, quote, despite the great plumes of smoke that poured out of the chimney, neither the Sistine frescoes nor the cardinals inside the chapel suffered any smoke damage.
Well, that's good.
While the big corporate media was heavily focused on the Vatican, believe it or not, other things were going on in the world. Outgoing U.S. Interior Secretary Ken Salazar and California Governor Jerry Brown announced 3 massive new wind and solar projects to be built on public lands in Nevada and California, part of a program that pre-selects specific sites for fast-tracking utility-scale renewable energy generation.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, the 3 projects would generate 1,100 megawatts. That's enough to power about 350,000 homes. That brings to a total 37 big renewable energy projects now so far on public lands since 2009. That's enough to power about 4 million homes. And for those who are counting, when it comes to public lands, the oil and gas industry has leased 4 to 5 times the acreage of public lands that have been assigned for renewable energy projects.
So they're using those public lands to mine, to drill, to frack, as opposed to use them for renewable projects like solar and wind.
That's right. And solar energy overall in the United States grew 76% in 2012 alone. That jump was led by utility-scale projects like the ones on public lands, but also includes small-scale arrays and residential rooftops. Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Energy announced a wave of new federal funding to help the nuclear industry design, design and license modular reactors and create a new factory network to build them. Modular reactors are literally small modules built in a factory that can then be shipped by truck or rail and assembled on site. Theoretically, they could be constructed in a third of the time and at a third of the cost of massive conventional nuclear reactors.
So this is a whole bunch of little nuclear reactors that are going to be spread all over the place?
Yeah, the Department of Energy wants to replace dozens of coal-fired power plants that are expected to be retired in coming decades.
Is it just me, or does that sound like a terrible idea?
Well, it depends on if you like nuclear.
I don't.
And we should note that federal support for nuclear dwarfs any support for other renewable technologies like solar and wind.
Do these smaller reactors have smaller explosions when they fail?
I don't know yet, but they still generate waste, and there is still no plan to deal with that.
Oy.
As the budget and debt standoff continues in the nation's capital right now, the oil industry and their front groups are already running ads against any attempts to eliminate their billion-dollar taxpayer subsidies as a way to reduce the deficit.
Of course they
or
are.
Any attempts to make them pay for the cost of their pollution through a carbon tax.
Of course they are.
Even though the Obama administration has repeatedly insisted that no carbon tax is on the table. Finally, speaking of fracking...
Don't frack my mother, 'cause I ain't got no other.
Sean Lennon, son of John Lennon of the Beatles and Yoko Ono, and a musician in his own right, has launched his own campaign to convince New York Governor Mario Cuomo to reject fracking in New York State. He made a cheeky video with his mom called Don't Frack My Mother. We've got the whole thing posted at our website. Check it out at greennews.bradblog.com.
If you dare. For more on that and the other stories we couldn't get to, as Desi says, check our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, download us anytime via iTunes. Listen to us on your mobile device via Stitcher or the TuneIn radio apps. Find us and like us on the Facebook and follow us 24/7 on the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
You can do anything that you want to do, but please don't frack my mother. Don't frack my mother.
This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. If you downloaded the podcast for free over on iTunes, now 100% commercial free, or subscribe to the videos on YouTube, or, of course, listening live on SoFlo Radio, RadioOrNot.com, or We Act Radio, 1480 AM in Washington, D.C. Before the break, we were telling you about Think Progress's 5 craziest things they learned at CPAC. And that's, it's hard to top. How do you pick the crazy upon the crazy upon the crazy? But they managed to do it. That's why they get the smart nod from us all the time. We already told you about the dangers of marriage equality, how the Agenda 21 will take a quarter of America's land, and how Marxists control the Catholic Church, all according to participants of the CPAC conference. The 2 other amazing new wannabe facts that Think Progress found out. Number 4, George Soros controls everything. Yes, America's Survival and Cliff Kincaid had made Think Progress' top 5 list again, saying that President Obama hates America, quote, just like his master, George Soros. Nothing racially charged about that language or anything. But yes, according to America's Survival, George Soros basically controls all of the administration, the liberal media, and that Glenn Beck was fired simply for exposing George Soros. So in case you hadn't gotten your Glenn Beck fill lately, that is a 30-second filler-up of Glenn Beck craziness.
Glenn Beck was the keynote there years back. It was awesome.
Well, Ted Cruz is.
He was the keynote with his blackboard and all that stuff.
Well, Ted Cruz is for this year's CPAC convention. So was. So
and the famous
I
one
don't think
of the bouncing up and down Rush Limbaugh, that was CPAC too.
Yeah, I don't think it gets. I don't think Ted Cruz is any less crazy than Glenn Beck.
Aren't they both in Texas now? I mean, is Glenn in Texas now? I believe he is. Something like that. I don't know. I've totally driven this show in the ditch. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Number 5 of Think Progress's craziest things learned at CPAC, Puerto Rico's statehood referendum was totally rigged. It was a secret plot to promote Spanish as the official language of our country.
That's awesome.
Yes. It was by a group called Pro English.
Geraldo Rivera for president.
Yes.
Of the new Spanish America.
Pro English's singular mission, as you could guess, is to promote English as the country's official language and wage war on any attempts to provide civic services in Spanish or any other foreign language. And they were handing out...
Those are two separate things, by the way.
Yes.
Making an official language isn't a bad thing. There should be a common language for doing business in school that everyone should be brought into over an educational cycle. But their purpose isn't just to make English the official language. It's to disenfranchise and completely keep non-English speakers,
right,
new immigrants
who are citizens
out of the process,
right,
out of opportunity to not have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's about exclusion. It's not about.
It's not even, they don't get far enough mentally into that to exclude them from life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All they care about is exclude them from the voting process.
Of course.
Anything else is secondary.
Right.
So, yes, Pro English laid out their 8-page newsletter with a cover story called...
Is there a Spanish version? I'm kidding.
With a cover story called Rigged Vote in Puerto Rico Produces Artificial Majority for Statehood. It was all a big scheme to promote Spanish speaking in our nation. Yeah, all you can do is shake your head on that. And, those are just the craziest things. It's pretty funny when Rand Paul and Marco Rubio, who are both notably pretty nuts, don't make the list of the craziest things at any particular CPAC event. But the two were fighting for the future of the GOP at CPAC.
Yeah.
Basically had completely opposing stances on where the party should go. Marco Rubio says they don't need any new ideas. They've got an idea. It's called America, and it's working.
I love that, America. What's your solution, America?
America.
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 That's it. That's all you need to know.
You got the clap? What's
America.
America?
Yeah.
Your
heart's failing?
America.
America. Immigration?
America.
Economy?
America.
All right, just so we know. And Rand Paul says we need all new ideas, that they need to be the party that embraces young people and what he calls a Facebook generation.
He's only a decade behind.
That's a quote. He addressed the, quote, Facebook generation, a younger constituency that both he and his father have attracted. Well, that's because porn and pot gets a lot of young voters.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Liberty's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Freedom's fun.
Exactly.
You can be a hippie from the 60s and keep your money, too. Come join us. We're just repackaging the same box of garbage.
That's pretty much, yes. Rand Paul, fresh off his 13-hour filibuster fame, which afterwards we learned that his whole grandstanding on the Senate floor, he had actually received the response from the administration beforehand.
I think that was a false report.
You think?
Yeah, because I was researching that this morning. Somebody I think they got a date off. The response was the next day.
Oh, okay.
Because
fair
on
enough.
the 6th, the response is dated the 7th. So.
Well, then that's fair. We had heard earlier reports that he had gotten that an hour and a half before speaking.
Yeah, I think someone
just jumped the gun on that a little bit.
And I jumped the gun repeating what someone jumped the gun.
It happens.
So my apologies.
That's okay. Yes, Rand Paul says the GOP of old has grown stale and moss-covered. I don't think we need to name names here, do we? The new GOP will need to embrace liberty in both the economic and the personal sphere. And that is just a code way of saying let people do what they want in their bedrooms and
stay out of the evangelical business.
Yes.
The thing is that Reagan, their savior that they always talk about, this was the three-legged stool. We've talked about it a lot here. Strong defense, strong social values, strong economics. Rand Paul only has one of them. Arguably.
Yeah.
Strong economic policy because he's an isolationist.
Yes.
And he wants to stay the heck out of the social stuff. So how does he get it? Are they abandoning the three-legged stool is the question.
Well, I guess Marco Rubio's trying to uphold that.
Right. So given that, is it possible that Rubio's a stronger candidate? Rand Paul, of course, won the straw poll.
Of course. As Ron Paul did several years.
Yeah, but then when it came right down to it, Romney won it closer to the actual
Right.
election.
I mean, I think Rand Paul is picking up the torch from his dad here, and he's not going to get.
It's a family business.
He's not going to get the party respect, just like the same thing that occurred with his dad. And honestly, I can't say I blame them, even for crazy conservatives. Rand Paul is out there on the fringes. He gets an idea right once and again, like he is, like he has with the drone policy. But for the most part, he's nuts.
It's an overly simplistic solution that because it's so simple is really appealing, but when it's applied in the real world, it falls apart.
Exactly. But it'll be interesting to see.
Rarely turn out well.
It will be interesting to see what happens with the party as this plays out. And Shane, you picked up on yesterday when we were watching CPAC on C-SPAN. You picked up an interesting speech by David Keene.
Yeah, and I'd never heard of this guy before, but he's a big conservative guy. He's actually, we talk about Wayne LaPierre a lot.
This guy seems a bit crazier.
Well, also, when they introduced him, he's the president of the NRA.
Right.
Wait,
Double take. I thought that was Wayne LaPierre.
LaPierre's the executive vice president and CEO. This is the president of the NRA. He used to be a party leader, conservative party leader, blah, 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 David Keene. And I guess I've listened to the speech now twice. And his job in this speech was kind of to bridge the gap between conservatives and the Republican Party. Because conservatives, especially when you have Republicans like George W. Bush, really like to run like crazy. They don't do it at first. They do it afterwards and say, we never really supported that guy. He wasn't a conservative. We're conservatives, not Republicans. I mean, you turn on any Fox commentator, and they will never claim to be a Republican.
Right. They're either independent, libertarian, or conservative.
They're conservatives, but at the same time, they're just pretty much Republicans. And he was there to bridge the gap between saying conservatives were always ahead and then the Republicans caught up. So the Republicans have to catch up again.
Yeah, conservatives were ahead.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
In 1940, maybe.
Right. And it was interesting because he went through a history of the conservative, the modern, what he calls the modern conservative movement, the Buckley, intellectuals then translating into policy. And I've always heard the story told that it was a response to the 60s. JFK and Johnson specifically, civil rights, the great, what do they call it? In terms of Medicare, Medicaid, all those reforms that, out of the 60s and the hippies that this was the contrary to that movement. But it was interesting. He started in the 50s. He claimed it was a response to the 50s, which they had a Republican president for the vast majority of the 1950s, from 52 through. Eisenhower, he threw Eisenhower under the bus. This is the first time I'd heard that. Perhaps I've not been listening carefully enough.
But he had a whole message that we essentially, you kind of suspected, but you didn't, it hadn't been said before. In that what new voters and, new conservatives and party leaders, how they conflict. How party leaders don't really embrace the views of new voters.
Right. Well, they're always behind.
According to David Keene.
Right. But essentially what he's saying is that they're the same ideas. We just have to learn how to sell them better, which actually was probably the most honest thing I heard.
Right.
But it's the same box of garbage that nobody really wants to buy. They purchased it before it didn't work. Of course, he disagrees with that part. He says, we're right, they're wrong. He said that over and over again. But it was more of a, how do we sell this? It was like a convention of used car salespeople.
Selling the same broken down Ford Pinto.
The Pinto that blows up when it gets in a rear-end collision. Like Amway, you're trying to get out to sell this thing that and claiming that everyone follows it. They're the vast minority in this country, these modern conservatives.
Right, but they want to believe that they have the majority of voters, and they just don't.
I mean, this is part of his idea is that our stuff works, and right now doesn't work, but we need to hasten. The phrase in this really concerned me because this is a lot like Mitch McConnell saying our goal is to make him a one-term president. Listen to this.
Because try as they might, they're going to fail. They thought they had the world in their grasp in the 50s, and they think they've got it again today. But even the least political of our fellow citizens will eventually grasp that they are on a road that is going to lead somewhere that none of us want to go. Our job is to hasten that realization.
Hasten the realization. Just that phrase in and of itself.
Yeah.
Is
essentially destroy and make it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Their obstructionism is we don't agree with what's going on because we have a completely different set of ideas that have never worked. They claim they've worked, and we have to hasten the demise of this establishment right now.
Right.
It's really I know that everyone points out the Rand Pauls and the Rubios, but this was the real policy speech.
Yeah, I would recommend people go and watch it over. If you want to know what's really going on with the Republican Party and why there's this infighting between Rand Paul and Rubio, David Keene sums it up as to what this divide is.
And so this year, Rand Paul becomes a hero to grassroots Republicans across the country, and an aging former presidential candidate of the old establishment tells the press, we don't want people like him because he appeals to young people.
John McCain.
Well, let me tell you something. Political movements and political parties have two choices in this world. They grow or they die.
Now, it's interesting that they're talking about growth but not change.
Right. They still have that package from 1950, that product that long expired. So instead, they just want to relabel it.
Yeah, make sure you smell the milk before you drink it.
Exactly.
Like conservative.
So anyhow, we are way over for a break. We're going to run.
That's my fault.
That's okay. It's important stuff. We are going to run right to a break, and we'll be back here on Talking Left with more. Thanks for listening to me, Danielle and Shano, live on We Act Radio, RadioOrNot.com, and SoFlo Radio. We will be right back, so stick around.
Gotta get back in time.
It's our last errand today, Jimmy. Just need to pick up some light bulbs.
Whoa, there's so many. Did Grandma tell you which ones to buy?
No, but check out the label on this package. It'll help us find the right bulbs.
Does it really matter?
Well, sure. The new light bulbs use a lot less energy, so we save money on our electric bill by using an energy-saving incandescent, CFL, or LED.
How about this bulb?
Let's see. We need to replace the 60-watt bulbs in our bedside lamps. That one is 800 lumens, so it should do the trick.
I've never heard of lumens.
Lumens tell us how bright the light is. The more lumens, the brighter the bulb.
You know, Grandpa, you're a pretty bright guy.
Yeah, you're pretty smart yourself, Jimmy.
Lumens, the new way to shop for light. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. That's EnergySavers.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Energy.
You may be hearing about people having trouble making mortgage payments and risking losing their homes. Many of them just aren't aware of the options that can prevent foreclosure. There are many options available to homeowners, such as repayment and forbearance plans, loan modifications, and even refinancing. Where does someone go for help? They should talk directly with their lender or a qualified HUD-approved counseling agency. Both can provide helpful information without charging a fee. According to PMI Mortgage Insurance Company, it's not a good idea to pay for services that you can get for free from a lender or a qualified nonprofit counseling agency. To learn more, visit homesafepmi.com or call HUD at 1-800-569-4287 for a counseling agency near you. That's 1-800-569-4287. This message is brought to you by PMI, supporting sustainable home ownership that strengthens communities.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at WEAC Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hi, this is Tom Harmon.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster of Take Action News.
I'm Brad Friedman of BradBlog.com.
Hi, I'm cartoonist and agent provocateur P.S. Mueller.
This is Nicole Bell of crooksandliars.com, and this is...
You're listening to
and watching
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Great presidents aren't born, they are made. We've got to push people. They don't jump out in front of a parade if there's not a parade there. That is political suicide. The parade, metaphorically, already has to be in the streets with the picket signs saying, we need progressive talk in Portland, or we need marriage equality in Washington, or we need marijuana legalization in Colorado, you know, whatever.
Trans-Canada Pipeline.
Thank
Stop
you.
the pipeline.
We have to push for our positions because they're not just going to out of thin air.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
Just give me faith, make me believe. Come on, save me, Mr. Walking Man. If you can, come on, save me, stranger. If you please,
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Save me. Huh, Shano? That's what you think about Paul Ryan's budget?
Or spare me.
Spare me?
It's...
Yes. Well, Paul Ryan's budget, like many things Paul Ryan, leaves a lot to be desired.
That's such a nice way of putting it.
It also leaves a lot of unanswered questions.
It's for the imagination.
It
it's
is.
kind of a which way book.
It is. Fill in. It's a Mad Lib. It's a blank Mad Lib for you to fill in as you like.
Yeah.
Ezra Klein.
But it works. It all balances out in 10 years. We got our headline.
Right. Totally. Even though it's all based on blank questions.
Yeah.
Ezra Klein of the Washington Post and many other places who knows a thing or two about a thing or two when it comes to economics.
And then some.
Highlights the 5 biggest blank spots in the Paul Ryan budget. And there's a reason we're getting to this, but we're going to save that till after the break. Tax reform. Paul Ryan says nothing about how he'd reform the tax code. As usual, he does a trust us type mentality. His excuse is that reforming the tax code is the job of the Ways and Means Committee, yet he targets Medicare and Medicaid, which are also subject to the Ways and Means Committee. So taxes, trust us, we'll do it later. Medicare and Medicaid, that's fine. We can take that away from the Ways and Means Committee now. So that's a big unanswered question. And some experts say that his quote-unquote reform targets are deeply implausible and could lead to $5 trillion of needed offsets. So his tax reform could require $5 trillion with a T, in offsets. Medicare, of course, his big push is his premium support model, otherwise known as voucherizing Medicare.
Coupons.
Yes.
Here's
But
a little coupon.
it wouldn't take effect for a full decade. And according to Ezra Klein, no one knows if it would work. In fact, many people say that it would not. It has never worked to save massive amounts of money before in any other program, so they don't see why it would suddenly work now for Medicare. Social Security. Paul Ryan calls for, quote, action on Social Security by requiring both the President and Congress to put forth specific ideas and legislation to ensure the sustainable solvency of the critical program. That's his entire budget detail on Social Security.
Which actually doesn't bother me. Leave it alone.
He's saying that he wants action, but it shouldn't be up to him.
Well, yeah, because he has enough third rails in there he's already stepping on.
Yeah. The Section 920 sinkhole. Never heard about that, have you?
Is that in Florida? I've heard a lot of sinkholes. They swallow a house? I'm really confused.
Ryan gets about $1 trillion in savings from a category of spending known as other mandatory spending. It includes programs like food stamps, veterans benefits, portions of earned income tax credits, and more. But how these cuts are to be applied is not spelled out in his budget. $1 trillion of cuts from such vital programs he has, and it's his cuts are tucked into something he terms allowances, otherwise known as Function 920. Something we've never heard of, but an interesting name for essentially $1 trillion of cuts to important programs.
What number is it?
920.
So now he has Agenda 920. We should
Yes.
start calling it Agenda 920.
I think that's a great idea. Paul Ryan's,
scary.
it's scarier. And financial
It's
reform.
Agenda 920.
Financial reform. As Ezra Klein points out, there is no obvious reason this should be in a budget, but it is. So here we go. That's
Also,
Ezra Klein's.
Keystone XL's on there in there too.
Yeah. According to Paul Ryan on page 52, quote, this budget would end the bailout regime enshrined into law by the Dodd-Frank Act.
Bailout regime? What?
Yeah. That's what it says.
If you really want to end the bailout machine, start breaking up the banks, pal.
Right. So no idea on how he would change Dodd-Frank or what he would replace it, but that's what his budget says. Quite vague, quite Republican fantasy land, and just
it's not a binding document. The president doesn't sign it.
Right.
This is just a political argument they've decided they want to have.
Right.
Those grand bargain. There's going to be grand bargain.
Not with crazy people like Paul Ryan.
If you start that far to the right, how do you negotiate with a nut job?
Oh, good question. Well, we're going to talk about the Senate Democrats' budget and, more importantly, the Progressive Caucus budget, which the Balancing Act. We should certainly be considering that as a realistic possibility. We'll get to that and more in just a few minutes. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, live on We Act Radio, SoFlo Radio, and RadioOrNot.com. We'll be right back.
So, who is responsible for these outrages? It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
You might think that your state's political leaders are goofy, but hey, I'm from Texas. Goofy is as goofy does, and Texas does preeminent political goofy. Meet Drew Springer, a first-termer state representative out of the metropolis of Munster, Texas, population 1,600. Proud to be a hardcore GOP right-winger, he spouts the usual dogmatic drivel of that breed. Government has become too large, he prattles, overburdening our lives with excessive regulations that destroy freedoms. So, to strike a bold blow for freedom, Springer has sprung a bill on us called the Shopping Bag Freedom Act. This gem deals with one of the direst threats facing us Texans, the banning of single-use plastic shopping bags by environmentally conscientious cities like Austin. Save our bags is this goofus's rallying cry. Springer declares that Austin's perfectly sensible decision to keep millions of these pieces of plastic out of our landscape and landfills is an overreach of big government. Yet here he comes, an out-of-town agent of an even bigger government, arrogantly trying to overrule a fully debated and widely popular policy that Austin's democratically elected city officials adopted. Whatever your personal stand is on the politics of single-use plastic bags, surely we can agree that the good citizens of Austin, or of Munster for that matter, ought to have the freedom to decide such a weighty issue for themselves, without the excessive, overburdening intrusion of a state government goofball. The people of Austin decided that they can handle their shopping just fine without incurring the mess of these particular shopping bags, and that should be that. So thanks for your interest, Drew, but buzz off. This is Jim Hightower saying, anyone who thinks Goofy is just a cartoon character never met Springer.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Wisconsin U.S. Representative Mark Pocan, a House Budget Committee member, doesn't think much of the budget introduced by fellow Wisconsin Congressman Paul Ryan.
It's going to hurt economic growth. It's going to hurt job creation. It's going to do a lot to stymie any kind of growth that we've had with the economy. And they didn't sit down with the Democrats to propose this. So clearly nothing was learned from the election cycle about working together and trying to get something done. This is just taking the same thing, cutting and pasting, and putting the same bad ideas that have failed before, that the public said have failed. It's failed in Congress. And putting it out again really doesn't show any sincere effort to pass a budget that works for the middle class or the American people.
Ryan's budget turns Medicare into a privatized voucher system, slashes Medicaid, gives the Pentagon back what was cut by sequestration, while keeping sequester cuts for domestic programs in place. The discussion on immigration continues to advance with realistic proposals being brought to the table. Jesse Russell reports.
The AFL-CIO and Chamber of Commerce have been working with legislators to develop a comprehensive immigration reform policy. Ana Avendaño is Director of Immigration and Community Action at the AFL, and she said during a conference call on Thursday that without a broad and inclusive roadmap to citizenship, the entire bill will fall apart.
Immigrant communities will continue to feel terrorized. If we don't have a broad and inclusive roadmap to citizenship, there will still be undocumented workers in the workforce. There will still be crackdowns, and all of the problems that we see now will continue.
She said it's also important that the bill addresses future flow. So when the economy picks up again, the country is prepared to bring in immigrant workers.
When we actually have labor shortages, that there will be a structure within our immigration system that allows workers to come into our country, and they do so as full social partners and with all the rights that every single worker who is in our country at any given time has.
Public Citizen says after a year of the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, modeled on NAFTA, the effect has been exactly the opposite of what the Obama administration promised. U.S. exports to Korea dropped 9%, and Korean imports into the U.S. increased by 2%. The trade deficit with Korea grew by 30%, a $4 billion increase since the Free Trade Agreement took effect. Nearly 8,000 North Carolinians signed a petition to state government urging them to stop what they called the Great Tax Shift in North Carolina. That petition supports a more progressive tax system to ensure that low and middle income families are not asked to carry a greater load than the wealthy. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In biology, I learned that I'm fat. I'm stupid. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. The only thing I didn't learn in school today is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day.
They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov. A message from the Ad Council.
It's crazy, crazy, crazy. No stopping this warfare. It's crazy, crazy, crazy. We're breathing in the same air. It's crazy, crazy.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. So, before the break, we were talking about Paul Ryan's crazy budget and the 5 things we still don't know, which are huge unanswered questions. Well, it turns out that there's a lot of similar unanswered questions in the Democratic budget.
Really?
Yes.
Now, this is the one that Patty Murray introduced?
Yes.
Okay.
By contrast, Patty Murray's budget is more liberal, and yet, as Ezra Klein points out, it's more traditionally conservative. That's because it actually proposes protecting certain existing institutions. But the budget spells out more about what it won't do than what it will do. The budget speaks of $275 billion by further realigning incentives through the system, cutting waste and fraud, and seeking greater engagement across healthcare system. But at no point in the 114-page budget does it say how it's going to get those savings. So, saving healthcare, building on the Affordable Care Act, but no expression on how. The tax reform section talks at length about how we need more revenues, that we need to close loopholes. Again, no specifics.
Well, these are policy papers.
Right. Absolutely. They're not...
But this bothers me that the Democrats are pulling the same. We're going to have a budget that doesn't have any numbers in it.
Right. Exactly.
It's fine to say these are our goals.
And
I just get there.
I just think that if I'm going to sit here and criticize Paul Ryan for this,
You got to do it.
right, that I'm going to be fair. On budget, on defense, the budget quote, it says, this budget recognizes that in order to keep our commitment to service members to safeguard our national security and to continue our position as a beacon of freedom abroad, which in and of itself, that statement bothers me, we need to maintain a strong national defense. So that's what it says. It says that we need to maintain a defense, yet it does offer huge cuts to the military. So it doesn't talk about how those cuts will be implemented, where they'll come from, but it spends more time talking about protecting our national defense than, how we're going to shrink the size of our gigantic military-industrial complex.
Yeah, it's like a 4th grade book report.
Yeah.
I read Great Expectation. It was a very, 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 very good book.
Yes.
I liked it a lot.
On agricultural policy, it talks less about what it will change, but it's specific and direct about what it will keep. It says this budget provides flexibility to the Senate Agriculture Committee to write a strong 5-year farm bill that will maintain an effective safety net for farmers. So
the question is, what's effective? What is a safety net? What's a subsidy? You have to imagine that the people over the CBO are like, how in the hell do we score this?
Right.
Because they figure the less numbers they put in there, the more they can mush them around.
Well, it calls into question how either of them are scored.
It calls into question our entire budget process.
That's for sure. Yes. All we really know, like the conservatives' budget, like Paul Ryan's budget, all we really know is that it says that we'll have $975 billion in tax increases and $975 billion in spending cuts and $100 billion in stimulus spending.
That's it.
That's pretty much what we know.
Trust us.
Yes.
Wow.
So if we're going to criticize the Republicans for it, let's be fair. However, if we want a budget that has some specifics
and numbers,
we can look at the the Back to Work budget released by House Progressives.
Yay.
Yes, the Back to Work budget says, first sentence of the budget, we're in a jobs crisis that isn't going away. So instead of worrying about the deficit, it's worrying about the jobs deficit.
Because once you fix the jobs deficit, that fixes the budget deficit.
Right. And this budget, the progressive budget, is pretty bold. It's $2.1 trillion in stimulus from just 2013 to 2015, including $425 billion for infrastructure, $340 billion middle-class tax cut, $450 billion in public works, and $179 billion in state and local aid. It says that it would boost the GDP by 5.7% and add 6.9 million jobs just within 1 year of implementation.
A full implementation.
Right.
Right.
Of
course it would.
And it also calls for higher tax rates, a 49% tax on income over $1 billion.
Over $1 billion?
Over $1 billion.
No, I got no problem with that.
It adds a few additional tax brackets, leaving, $250,000, those rates pretty much where they are now, but enacting taxes on the super rich.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have any problem.
0.2%.
Right. And remember, that's same as a marginal tax rate. Your income underneath that is still going to be taxed how it was.
You'll be fine.
Exactly. So about $4.2 trillion in higher taxes over the next decade, according to the progressive budget. And, this is so extreme to the left. In my opinion, it's a good thing. It's a good extreme. I would love to see this passed. I would love to see.
Why don't we just debate it?
Yeah. Why don't we just, because voters have said that they actually approve of the right to work budget.
Right.
Yeah. But it doesn't even get to a vote in the House. $900 billion in defense cuts, public option for healthcare.
There you go.
So lots of stuff. But what's interesting is this is as far to the left as Paul Ryan's budget is to the right.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The difference being
we're negotiating from Paul Ryan's baseline, to use a budget term.
Not only that, but the difference being a portion of the Democratic Party, the Progressive Caucus, is supporting this budget while realistically knowing that they're fighting for the Democratic plan. The entire Republican side is fighting for the Paul Ryan budget.
Yeah. So
so both are extremes.
So as we've known for a very long time, there are progressives there, but we're still, the battle really is between the far right and the middle.
Yes.
The battlefield can never be moved from the middle against the...
I don't want to say never. I think that's what we need to fight for.
So far.
Yeah, it hasn't. But never is... never cuts out the possibility.
Now.
Yeah.
Or at least certainly since the 1930s.
I think we should be calling Congress and telling them at least put it up for negotiation. At least put it up for discussion, for debate. If you're going to vote against infrastructure projects and tax cuts for the middle class and putting people back to work, the government being the employer of last resort, if you're going to vote against a public option, if you're going to vote against all of these things that the majority of Americans actually support, I want you to do it in public.
And that's exactly what they don't want to do.
Exactly. I want to see what you say about it. At least then we can pretend like we have more options than Paul Ryan and a vague, middle-of-the-road Democratic budget.
Lukewarm versus crazy.
Exactly. So, anyhow, a few more minutes left in store. We've got a great St. Patty's Day story coming up for you next. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we will be right back with a beer story. Stick around.
Yeah, sorry about that. The show's gotten a little lowbrow.
What are you talking about? It's like the most hilarious show ever.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Hi, this is Tim Cormall from The Tim Cormall Show. Join me and my guests most weeks for a progressive roundtable discussion about politics, news, and other fun topics. We laugh a lot about the hilarious antics of the right-wing nutjobs, as well as have serious discussions about issues affecting all of our lives. You can check out The Tim Cormall Show at timcormall.com, and you can subscribe to the show for free in iTunes by searching for The Tim Cormall Show. You can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Tim Cormall. That's CORRIMAL. So come on over and join in the fun at timcormall.com.
You're listening to and watching
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Spread the responsibility. We're all in this together, right? You and me and Joe and Mary and whoever, we're all in this together. So spread the responsibility around. Students, get active and strike on education issues. Journalists, challenge corporate censorship of the truth and the real issues that we're facing today. Police officials, refuse to impose orders that you know to be immoral or wrong.
Or illegal.
Or illegal, right? Torturing, that's bad.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to The Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Your view is not being represented in this country because all of our views have been corrupted by money and politics. Remember, 94% of the time, the candidate who raises the most money wins.
That's the fact that we need to drive home constantly. It's all about the money. Dylan Radigan, you rock.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime.
7,000 high school students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. So here's a 26-second message of encouragement.
Hi, I'm Stacy. Look, I've been there. It's tough. And I just want to say, if you find yourself feeling negative, use it as motivation. Let it be like the fuel in the fire to keep you going. 'Cause the best is yet to come. Seriously, you're capable of great things you probably haven't even dreamed of yet. So don't quit now. See you at graduation.
Do you have 26 seconds to convince a student to stay at their desk? Now you can share your message of support at boostup.org. We can keep students in school. Visit boostup.org and take the first step. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
Hey, Dad, how do you throw a curveball? How do you build a fort? How do refrigerators run? How do fish learn how to swim?
Kids ask a lot of questions.
How high can you jump?
But you don't have to know every answer.
How many phone numbers are there?
Because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent.
How do cell phones work?
There are thousands of children in foster care who don't need every question answered.
What's electricity?
They just need you.
What's the moon made of?
For more information on how you can adopt, go to adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
The most important online radio station.
It's easier than ever to listen to SoFlo. On the air and everywhere. On any computer, any mobile device, iPhone, iTouch, and anywhere you are, just hit SoFloRadio.com. Tell your friends about South Florida's radio network, SoFloRadio.com.
In some of my songs, I have casually mentioned the fact that I like to drink beer. This little song is more to the point. Roll out the barrel and lend me your ears. I like beer.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you again, wherever you're checking us out. SoFlo Radio, RadioOrNot.com, Progressive Blend Radio, and of course, We Act Radio, 1480 AM WPWC in Washington, D.C., as well as on our home sweet home, TalkingLeft.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. So, happy St. Patrick's Day. Should have said that at the beginning of the show.
It wasn't until we were in the grocery store and I saw the corned beef there. I'm like, oh, my God, St. Patrick's Day is coming up.
Exactly. We were like, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
March 17th. Hey, what do you know?
It's pretty sad.
And as most people know, everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day. That's what people like to say.
Okay.
Everybody's cool. Irish on St. Patrick's Day.
I'm Irish every day.
And many people like to celebrate with the so-called Irish tradition of drinking beer. Strangely enough, green beer. I don't like that one, but
no.
According to Jeffrey Kahn of the New York Times, while you're celebrating St. Patrick's Day and enjoying your beer with friends or family, you're celebrating a very important tradition that he says is responsible for giving us civilization as we know it.
Wow, it wasn't water, it's beer.
It's beer. Yes, according to Mr. Kahn, we have 5 core social instincts that gave us structure and strength to move from primeval herds into civilization. Basically,
kegs were too heavy to carry.
Yes, we needed buddies to help carry the kegs. That was it. Exactly. We
always wanted the friend with the tap.
We developed a pecking order. We ensured each other that we did our chores, discouraged each other from offending one another. Basically, the social contract that binds us all.
Which goes out the window as soon as you get drunk enough.
There's a reason I'm getting to that.
I haven't read the article yet.
Yes, because of his social instincts, he says, our ancient forebears could cooperate, prosper, multiply, and pass on their DNA, thus allowing us to survive.
And beer goggles help with procreation?
Yes, they do. No, but he says that that social contract does not lend itself to exploration, curiosity, romance. That's debatable. Inventiveness and experimentation, important drivers of pushing our society forward.
So Lewis and Clark, their last words before they set out to
I need
West
a beer.
Was, hold my beer.
Hold my beer and watch this. Yes. He says that we needed something that would suppress those rigid social codes and yet allow our clans to stay safe and alive. And he sums it up in 3 words. We needed beer. He says that the ability to digest fermented fruit or grain evolved as early as 10,000 years ago. But they've found beer brewing equipment as far back as at least 2,000 years ago.
And it's still in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains.
Yes. There's a show about that. Tickle. Yes, but he says that human beings, because of beer, because of fermented, he accredits that it could be wine or other fermented potions as well, allowed people to be creative, to be inventive, to increase social expression, that it allowed a new dimension from those who were shy or perhaps submissive to others in the herd. It finally gave them the courage to speak up and maybe share a really good idea.
So liquid courage.
Courage helped develop civilization.
What does civilization's hangover look like then? I'm assuming what about now? As we're polluting, and not to be a downer, but yeah. I guess maybe that's where we are.
That's a really good point. It's funny, though, he says that you say hangover. A night of modest tippling may have ushered in these feelings of freedom, though the morning after, instincts to conform and submit would have kicked back in to restore the social order. So the hangover kept... So is the hangover as equally as important to the development of civilization?
It's an interesting theory.
It is.
It's fun, that's for sure.
Yes, he notes that supposedly Ben Franklin said, beer is living proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. Apparently, it's also living proof that God wants us to be civilized and uncivilized all at the same time. So, today, when you're having your corned beef and green beer, you are participating in a 2,000-year-old tradition that led to the development of civilization. So when people criticize you for drinking too much,
you're doing it for the good of all mankind.
You are exactly.
Just put some schematics down and say you're while you're drunk, you're drawing up the plans for a spaceship to Mars.
That's it.
Because that's.
And who knows? You could be the inventor. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong there?
Perfect.
You could be the inventor of the next big idea to move society forward. It could happen.
We didn't play Where's John McCain today.
Because John McCain isn't anywhere today.
Well, he's probably somewhere, but he isn't on the Sunday morning shows.
It only counts if he's on the Sunday morning shows.
I think he's still getting adjusted to daylight savings.
Yeah, when you're old, it takes a long time.
You know, daylight savings is a communist plot too, because we move forward.
Yes.
They like fall. They like when we move backwards.
Yeah, they just wish instead of an hour we could move back like 50
decades.
years. Yeah, exactly. they call it
societal savings time.
Yeah. So
all right.
Anyhow,
get out of here.
Yes, we do. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to our great guests, Daniel Marans and Lance Enderle. Thanks to Nicole Sandler of RadioOrNot.com, George Rodriguez of SoFloRadio.com, everybody over at We Act Radio, Alex Lawson, Kimon Freeman, Pete Callahan, Rich Webster, Daniel Marans, David Schuster. Thanks to Rocky Mountain Mike for our awesome intro music. Thank you, the listeners, and everybody over on We Act. Stay tuned for Mark Levine. We will be back next week. Happy St. Patrick's Day.